Chapter 519. God Thief. Can't you be a little more goddamn quiet? You keep mumbling to yourself all day long, pitter-patter. Can't you save some energy? A loud and clear voice broke the silence of the underground prison, as it was heard speedily from afar. Yiqing Luo could tell that the direction of the voice was 100 meters away from the underground prison. She shut her eyes and speedily constructed a map in her mind from the direction where the voice came from. That place should be the resting place of the underground prison guards. Wait a minute. Yiqing Luo suddenly opened her eyes, as a sliver of astonishment flashed past her eyes. Did she hear wrongly? That guard shouted God Thief? That God Thief who had died in Death God Castle 10 years ago? It was said that 10 years ago, Nirvana Realm's #1 God Thief had infiltrated Death God Castle to steal something, and from then on disappeared from the world, disappearing into the legends. Many people said that God Thief had died in Death God Castle. God Thief's death also caused Death God Castle's reputation to soar. This amusing old man, who looked extremely unreliable, was actually God Thief. I've been locked up by you for several years, not allowed to move or speak. Do you treat me as a dead man? The old man spat out fiercely as he raised his voice and roared back. Tunnel. Perhaps it was because his throat was dry all year round. His roar that there were any mechanisms or arrays. That guard didn't make any sound. After walking for a long distance, apparently he was already used to the old man's character. After turning a corner, Luo's scalp turned numb from the shock. Heaved a sigh of relief. She dug her ears as a pair of half-squinted eyes gazed in all directions. This old man's character, was the secret passage on the map. Why did she feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity? For her current location after the old man finished his roar, found the secret he suddenly coughed in the direction of the exquisite pair of bright eyes as she headed straight for it. Young lady, the direction to leave is that way. Your God Thief. God Thief laid on Yiqing directly shoulder as he reminded her words. As she returned back to the front of the old man, as she followed the map in her memory, shook that and the array marked head as he clicked his tongue. Speedily avoiding every young lady like you to have heard of my name. Even though she was carrying Holy Pirate on her back, even though I've not been in the world for so many years, the strange footwork under his feet continued to be displayed. He really was God Thief. Holy Pirate furrowed his eyebrows. Look a little silly. His eyes were filled with confusion. No wonder he was trapped here for 10 years. He didn't open his mouth to remind her legends about you. Yiqing Luo was able to accurately avoid all the arrays that were set up. And when it was all about how you fell in Death God Castle, she didn't hesitate to choose a passageway into a coward swiftly. Clearly, the old man clenched his fist in agitation as he stared at Yiqing Luo with a black face. She scanned the surroundings. How could I be a coward? Along the way, Death God Castle, he didn't see any signs of a fight or blood stains in the secret passage. Yiqing Luo heaved a sigh of relief, even if it's a scam and you've fallen for it. The exquisite pagoda's secret ability. However, Yiqing didn't have the time to finish as she turned a blind eye to God Thief's footsteps suddenly halted. Stinking brat. The expression on his face was somewhat grave. Obviously sensed that the sounds of fighting coming from the secret chamber. Although he seemed likely the pagoda was dungeon over the past maybe it was because so many years the bloody stench of Castle Pirate possibly be still able to maintain his composure. No matter what, he was still a fresh blood that Yiqing Luo's nose was the little brat carried him on her back. Brothers turned directly walked Yiqing Luo's tunnels contracted. Stared at this girl who looked extremely directly rushed was filled with great hope. There were several luminous pearls. If it wasn't for the fact that he was trapped by the illuminated the entire secret chamber, he would probably fly into the chamber was already in chaos. The youngsters of the one harbor she was just saying while the other was constantly battled with a bunch of cultivators drawn by dressed in green. It was somewhat similar. No one noticed that after they stepped into the secret passage. Nights, the stone door behind them saw the totem on the mercenary before it closed. Teacher Goyer didn't care about his reputation at all. There were quite a number of them was extremely concerned about his own good name. 30 over beside him fighting so frightened the moment each he couldn't guess what the remaining dozen or so people took out. Master's eyes were chapter 520 looked all the rare treasures into an chamber to them, chilling to the bone. An interspatial pocket was a magical artifact. The way she looked at him because of the word coward looking at a stranger spat out a gust of cold air. She had really forgotten about him. Don't you want to leave that space pocket? He would only hold 100 items at most. Yiqing Luo's eyes curved as she gave a crafty smile. The slightest bit of advantage. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes in puzzlement. Those people who were still in battle after so many years of not leaving this godforsaken place, God Thief in a corner, completely disconnected from the outside world. Saying that, he totally couldn't figure out what this feather fan in her hands tightly as she stood up when he suggested walked towards the world to save direction. She put on a look of the Iron Blood Warriors as though she didn't want to bother about him. Yin Xiao Yi and Xiao Jing tried to save him in a blink of an eye and fought with him. Before I save
Peng's
you,
weapon was a
you
huge
have to
axe.
tell me where is this
As
place.
he brandished
Why
it,
are you
it
locked
brought
up
along
here?
a strong
Do you have
burst
any
of
way to
profound
leave?
energy.
Forcing
Luo
Yin
paused
Xiao
as the
and
crafty
Xiao
and
to join
scheming look in
forces.
her eyes was
Before
obvious.
they could barely block
After
his
finding out
gigantic
that this
axe.
old man was God
Whereas
Thief,
at this moment,
Luo
behind
had
Yin
no
Xiao
intention
and
to let him
Xiao
off.
An
After
Iron Blood
this,
warrior cultivator
Thief,
got close to
we
them,
people in the
as he
pugilistic
silently
world,
raised the huge
especially
blade in his
people
hands,
like you who have
and
a
directly
legend in the
chopped down
pugilistic
towards their
world.
heads.
You should
Yi
know.
Qing Luo's expression
logic of
congealed as
repaying
the feather
kindness,
fan in
right?
her hands
God
opened
Thief
up
was
and
in a
numerous
mess.
iron wires
Indeed,
flew
he
out,
hadn't used his brain
directly
for several
coiling around
years,
that cultivator's
and totally
neck.
couldn't keep
Her
up with
fingers
this young
clasped
lady's
the feather
thoughts.
fan tightly.
This young lady
as she
wasn't
pulled with
fooled
all
by
her
him
might.
at all.
The Iron
Instead,
Blood warrior
she had turned the
cultivator's
tables
body
on him.
was flung
This
towards
young
Yu
lady was
Qipeng,
really quick-witted, and her brain worked extremely fast. Chapter
Young lady,
529.
if I have a way to
Instantly,
leave,
flesh and blood
then I will be the
splattered
one
everywhere.
saving you.
Yin
Not you
Xiao
saving
and
me.
Xiao Jin
God
reacted in
Thief
time
felt
that
that
if
if
he
he
were to fall into the
retreated,
hands of a young
evading
lady
the huge
today,
axe's
his
profound
reputation in this
fluctuations.
lifetime would be
Qing
ruined.
Luo,
On
Yi
seeing
Qing
that
Luo's
familiar
brows rose
figure
as she
appearing
spread
in
out her
front of them,
hands.
the
If
both
you
of
can
them were
save me,
overjoyed.
then you won't
The
be
other
chained to the
youngsters
wall
who were
by the
battling
profound
heard Yin
shackles.
Xiaoyi's voice, and
Damn,
immediately turned
this
their
young
gazes
lady's
over.
words made sense.
Indeed,
He
they
actually
saw that
had
slender
nothing to say
figure
in
standing
reply.
in front of Yu
I'm a
Qipeng.
dignified
Her
God
posture
thief.
was outstanding
Naturally,
as
I
she
will
stood
repay
upright.
kindness.
Her pair
God
of charming
thief
eyes were
his
like
teeth as
torches,
his features turned
as
sinister.
though it was tainted with
Young
endless
lady,
frost.
the
As she stared
prerequisite
coldly
is,
at Yu
you are
Qipeng.
able to undo
She
the
didn't look
profound
at them,
ice shackles.
but the youngsters
The
could feel
profound
Yi
ice
Qing
shackles
Luo's worry
were
towards
indestructible.
them. Their hearts,
and it
which
was
had been
condensed
hanging
with
in the world's
suspense,
number one
mysteriously
armament
calmed
master's
down.
powerful profound
As long
chi.
as Yi Qing
In
Luo
order
was
to
here,
undo the profound
everything
ice
would
shackles,
not be a problem.
one had to
There
steal
was no
the key to the
difficulty,
chain, which could
God
obstruct
Thief's
their
bright
footsteps.
eyes flashed past
They
an
had already
indistinct
barged
radiance.
into Death God
Young
Castle,
lady,
and obtained the
I have a
exquisite
question to
pagoda.
ask you.
Were they still
What
afraid of
problem?
the Iron Blood
Who
warriors?
taught you that secret
Trying
technique?
to spoil their mission?
Secret technique?
Trying to
Did the
disintegrate
thief
their
saint
the
see
world
her
group?
teleport and
No,
enter this prison
but
cell?
they could.
Why was it that
The
every
youngsters'
time she
battle
used
intent was
teleportation,
instantly
she would
ignited
be
at the
seen through by
instance when
others?
Yi Qing Luo
Could it be
appeared?
that the rewards
God
of the
Thief, who was
purgatory
sitting
tower
in the corner,
were all
trying his
secrets that
best to
couldn't be
loosen
made
up his
public?
muscles?
Thinking
And when
back
he saw
to the
this
last
scene,
time,
a
the
sliver
ghost
of
doctor
astonishment
had
flashed
also
past
seen
his
her
eyes.
use the teleportation
These youngsters
secret art.
actually exploded with energy.
That was why he had
which
appeared
made him
to help
feel
her when the
overwhelmed. The
administrator
administrator
was looking for
Their
trouble,
gazes were filled
and had
with a
even taken
confident
her
glow.
in as his
Was it
disciple.
because the ghost
Of Yi
doctor
Qing
had
Luo's
even
appearance?
mentioned
It
that it was
seemed
the
as
King
though
of Thieves'
these youngsters'
teleportation
gazes
secret
were indeed
technique
revolving
Saint
around the
Thief,
young lady.
King of Thieves, Yi Qing
Indeed,
Luo
alas,
blinked
her
who was
eyes.
filled with
The
surprises.
King of Thieves.
He was getting
Don't
more
tell
and
me
more
he's your
interested in this
ancestor?
lass.
Ancestor.
At this moment, Blarg
Yi
cough,
Qing
cough,
Luo
cough.
didn't know what God
Holy
Thief
Pirate
was
choked
thinking
and
about.
coughed. Her
His
cold
body,
gaze swept
which
past
was hanging
Yi
on the
Qipeng
ice
and
chains,
chains, as her
shook
lips
as he
curled
coughed.
into a sneer
The
of
chains
ridicule.
hit the wall and made
Eldest
a loud
young
noise.
Master Yuchi
Yi
is such
Qing
a
Luo
filthy
was at a
person.
loss.
What's the
Isn't it?
logic of snatching
Then how
the
did you
mission,
recognize
which
that
had
it's a
already been
secret
given
technique?
away?
Given
God
away.
Thief, who had finally
You're
stopped
obviously the
coughing,
one
had
who
no
snatched it
expression
away
on his
forcefully.
pitch black face.
Yu Qipeng's
Only
eyes
that
burst
pair
out
of bright
with an
eyes
eerie
revealed some
viciousness.
helplessness. This originally
Yes,
belongs to
that's
me.
the King of
If you
Thieves'
don't have
secret
the ability
technique,
to keep this
how did you
mission,
find out about
then
it?
don't try to be brave. Yi Qing
Chapter
Luo
521.
sneered. That's right. If you
Overlord.
don't have the ability
God Thief
to keep the
frowned as he
mission,
searched for this
then why
name in
try
his
to be
mind?
brave? After
Now
some
you're
time,
like a sinister
he suddenly
rat,
nodded his
playing
head.
tricks behind
I've
the
heard of
scenes,
this name before,
which really suits
it's
your
rumored
Yuchi
that he's
family
an
style.
incredible young man.
Yu Qipeng's
Just based on
expression
his own
turned
ability,
stiff.
he
Yi
established
Qing
his
Luo's
own
words were
powerhouse
obviously
in
mocking
Nirvana
him.
realm. In the
His
mercenary
words
guild,
paused and his
he
eyes
was the one
suddenly
who
shone.
couldn't hold on to the
I
mission.
heard that the
and
Imperial
gave it to
Palace
the
has
world
kept
group.
quite a number of
A
rare
wisp of
treasures,
faintly discernible
and they are
black energy
absolutely not
flashed past
inferior
Yu
to these
Qipeng's
things in
eyes.
Death God
His
Castle.
hand, which was holding
It was
the
because
huge
of this
axe,
that
tightened
God Thief
as he
remembered
directly
Di
chopped
Emotian's
towards
name.
Yi Qing Luo.
It's him.
What are
Yi
you
Qing
talking
Luo
about?
nodded.
Speak with
You
your
know the
ability.
blink movement secret art?
The light in God Thief's eyes
When
dimmed
the axe
slightly.
chopped down,
He muttered
it brought about an
Emotian's name
extremely
and
strong
immediately shook his
fluctuation of
head.
Xian Qi.
No. Yi Qing
Initially,
Luo narrowed her
he
eyes
opened his
as she
mouth to
speedily
talk to
took
this
half a
young
step
lady, back was because
her eyes were filled with coldness as she curled her lips in disdain.
He wanted to find out from her mouth where she learned so afraid of the world from. And
he
how
actually
she didn't
didn't
hesitate
to
to
use
use
his
his
own
own
soul
soul to make a
deal.
deal. Looks like the
Could it
Yuchi
be that the
family's
item
fate
from that
has
year
come to
was
an
with
end?
Diemo-Xian?
It was just as
Could it
she
be
and
that
old
your
man
old
song had
ancestor
guessed.
didn't impart the
This
secret
Yuchi
art
Peng
to you
attached the
instead?
aura of the dark forces
Instead,
onto the giant
he placed
axe.
it in the purgatory
Such a deal
tower
could
as the
easily
reward
end up
for
like
the
what
first
happened
level
to
of
Yi
purgatory
Qinglu
in the past.
Yi Qingluo
where her
didn't
soul
ask
was
this
completely
question.
devoured
God
by the
Thief
dark
had the deep
forces
meaning in his
profounding
eyes,
Qi.
and when he
The
raised his
reason why
eyes
Yuchi
again,
Peng was
his
so
eyes were
confident
filled with
was
smiles.
indeed because
How
of
would
the
I be
deal
able
with
to
the
guess
dark
old
forces?
ancestors' thoughts?
Hearing Yi
Since you know
Qingluo's
the
words,
blink movement
Yuchi Peng's
secret art
expression
been
changed
changed
slightly.
The profound
His gloomy
eyes
eyes were
key
filled
is on
with
that prison
coldness.
guard. Occasionally,
Steal the key over.
a wisp of black gas
Steal.
would flash past.
After being locked up for
You.
10 years.
How did you
He
know?
still couldn't
How did
change
you
his
know
thief's
about the
temper.
dark forces energy?
What was on his mind
How
was
did you
still
know
the
that he
idea
had
of
used
stealing
his soul
something
to make a deal?
Yi Qing
His
Luo
deepest
sat down
hidden
next
secret
to
had been
God Thief as she
discovered by
leaned
Yi
against the
Qing
wall
Luo
and crossed
He
her
was
legs.
even ridiculed by
You
Yi
haven't
Qing
answered
Luo.
my earlier question.
This was as though his pride had
God
been
Thief.
stepped on fiercely by
This
Yi
young
Qing
lady
Luo.
really didn't let go of any chance. This is Death God Castle's underground prison. And those
Chapter
who are
5:30.
imprisoned here
Yi
are all
Qing Luo's
cultivators
eyes
who had
sunk
once
slightly.
barged into
In
the
her
underground
mind,
prison.
Old Man
And their
Song sighed
cultivation are
worriedly.
not bad.
If the dark
God
forces
Thief
energy
muttered
was
to himself
residing
for a
in Yi
moment
Qing's courtyard
and started to
then
answer
perhaps
Yi
Yi
Qing
Qing's
Luo's
question.
could still be saved.
Those who are
But
able to
now,
barge into the
Yi
mechanism
Qing chose
and
to
reach
let
the
the dark
underground
forces
prison
energy to
are
attach
all
itself to him
cultivators who
at
were
any
in Death
time
God
and place.
Castle.
Now
And
that he
almost
was
succeeded.
exposed by Yi Qing
When
Luo,
Yi Qing Luo
his
heard
heart
that,
suffered a heavy
her
blow.
slender brows
A
creased
restless
slightly
and uneasy
as she
heart
didn't
had
understand.
an opening.
In a place
Allowing
like
the
Death
dark
God
forces
Castle,
energy to
shouldn't
swiftly
they just
swallow
kill
Yi
the
Qing's
intruders after
soul?
catching them?
When Yi Qing
Why did
Luo
they go
heard
through
that,
so much
she
trouble to
recalled the
build a
previous
dungeon
Yi Qing
and
Ling.
lock these people
After
up in
she
it?
was controlled
This
by the
trial
dark
lasted
forces
for 10 years.
she became a marionette.
What benefits did
That
this bring
energy
to
was
Death
extremely
God
strong.
Castle?
Because
If the dark
Death
forces
God
energy
Castle
was
needs
completely
cultivators
merged
with
with
decent
Yi Qing,
abilities to nurture
then it
into
would be
their own
even harder
thieves.
to deal with.
Holy Pirate
This mission,
squinted his eyes and
Iron-blood
shot out a
warriors
sharp
must
light.
take it. If
Yi
you do not
Qing
agree,
suppressed the panic
you will
and
be
fear
locked
in
up
his
here
heart
and
from being
beaten
every
seen
few
through.
days until
As
you
he waved
agree.
the huge axe in his
As
hand.
a thief
A thief who could enter Death God
Castle.
Yi
He must
Qing
be a
Luo's
famous
lips curled
thief in the
upwards,
Nirvana realm.
as the feather
Some
fan
of
in her
these
hands
thieves had their
spun,
own teams
condensing
and weren't
profound
willing
chi
to
into
betray
the
them.
feather fan.
Some of them had
Shooting
their
out
own
numerous
pride
bewitching
and were
red rays,
unwilling to
like
lower
sharp
themselves
blades
to others.
meeting Yi Qing's
But some of
attack.
them,
Yi
because
Qing
they could
Luo
not
resisted
withstand
Yi
the
Qing's
vicious
attack.
beatings every now and then.
Moreover, it was a relaxed
Finally
look,
agreed to
without
the
any
Death God
pressure at
Castle's
all.
request.
When Yen
and
Xiao
signed a
Yi and
life
Xiao
and death
Jin saw this,
contract. They were reassured.
You were beaten up for 10
At the
years?
same time,
Yi
they
Qing
joined
Luo
the
was
other
astonished.
youngsters' battle.
Even the word
Momentarily,
coward
was
the
able to
entire
agitate
secret
God
room was in
Thief's
chaos.
So
As
how
the
did he
blood
survive
stench
after
became
being
thicker.
beaten up by these
In
guards
mid-air,
for 10 years?
the red ray's sharp
No
blades
wonder God
spun,
Thief's body was
encircling
riddled
Yi
with
Qing's
scars and
surroundings
scabs
once.
of all sizes.
Following that, like a whirlwind, it directly
Chapter
spun towards
522.
Yi Qing Luo's
These
direction.
people in Death God
Yi
Castle
Qing Luo's slender
were
hand
really
stretched
patient.
out.
10
As she
years
caught the
didn't
feather
agree,
fan steadily,
so they guarded
the
for
next
10
second,
years.
her
These
feet
guards
were like
had
the wind,
extremely good
as she
control over the
speedily
way
closed in
and
on Yi
strength they
Qing.
used to beat
Yi
people.
Qing's huge
Apparently
axe
they
looked
had gone
heavy,
through special
but when
training.
he waved it,
Not only
it was
did they hit the
extremely
most
nimble.
painful part
His
of the human
reaction was
body,
extremely swift,
but they also didn't
as
hurt
that
the
axe
cultivator's
blocked Yi Qing
meridians
Luo's flying red
in
ray's
case it
sharp
damaged
blades.
the cultivator's
Only
ability.
when he blocked the last
Yi
sharp
Qing
blade,
Luo was about to
his
kneel
back
down
suddenly
in front
felt a
of
chill.
Death God
He saw
Castle's
Yi
castle
Qing
lord,
Luo, who was
she had
originally
to
standing
admit
10
that
steps
Death God
away from
Castle's
him.
castle lord
Suddenly
was
appearing
indeed an
behind his
intelligent
back.
person.
He raised
There
his
was no
huge
lack of
axe,
talents in this
speedily
world,
turned around and
but
chopped
what they lacked
downwards.
were talents
This
who could
turn,
be used by
he
themselves.
saw that crafty sneer
Making
in Yi
use of
Qing
Death
Luo's
God
eyes.
Castle's rare
At
treasures.
the same time,
They attracted
Yi Qing
numerous
felt a dull
outstanding
pain on his
thieves
chest,
or
he
cultivators
saw
to
Yi
come
Qing
forth
Luo
to steal.
had unknowingly
Following
slipped out
that,
a dagger from
they
the
fell
handle
into
of that
Death God
feather
Castle's
fan.
trap.
The dagger
and were
pierced
locked
into
in
the
the underground
chest without
prison.
missing an inch.
If they were to submit
Immediately
and sign the
following
life
that,
and death
Yi
contract,
Qing Luo's
it would
slender
be
hand
equivalent
slapped
to
hard on
selling
the
their
other side of
lives
his
to Death
chest.
God Castle
The
for
inertia
the rest
caused
of their
Yi
lives.
Qing's body to
Death
fly
God
backwards.
Castle had
He
established
pulled out
their
the
own
dagger
forces
that was stuck in
and
his
were
chest.
able to call on
His
these
entire
thieves to
body
search for rare
smashed into the
treasures.
wall of the secret
Later
chamber.
on, they
Yi
placed
Qing
these
was
rare
in so much
treasures in
pain
Death
that
God's
his entire
entire
face
publicity
contorted into a
It
ball.
was simply too
As
profitable.
his pair of sinister and
But
spicy
Yi
eyes
Qing
stared
Luo felt
fiercely
that by
at
gathering
Yi Qing
these
Luo,
top exponents whose lives were in their hands,
it was as if he wanted to tear her into
absolutely
pieces.
not just to
Yi
contribute to
Qing
Death
Luo
God
pulled out a
Castle.
handkerchief
Death
from her
God
sleeve
Castle's castle
and gently
lord should
wiped
have
the
an even
dagger
bigger
on the
plot.
handle of the fan.
As long as you
That
undo the
posture, the
profound
attitude
shackles,
was almost
I
cold and
naturally have a
merciless.
way to get out.
Eldest young
God
Master
Thief had been
Yuchi,
keeping
even
silent
if
all
this
this
mission
while
is
and
given
couldn't
to
help
you,
but opened his mouth
do
to
you really
urge,
think that you have
steal
this
the
life
guard's key
to hand in
and
this
help
mission?
undo the profound
Yi
eyes
Ching
shackles
Luo
first.
sneered.
As she
Are you
casually
sure?
threw that
Yi Ching
blood-stained
Luo
handkerchief
felt that
onto
it
the
wasn't
ground.
reliable no
She
matter how
slowly
she
walked
heard it.
towards Yuchi
If
Peng.
God Thief really
Her
had a
steps
way
are
to
light,
get out,
and her
would he
posture
still
is
be
elegant.
trapped here for 10
A
years?
sense of fear arose
Although
in
so
Yuchi
many
Peng's
years
heart
have
for no
passed.
reason.
But I
After
remember
being
clearly
stabbed by
everything
Yi Ching
regarding
Luo,
Death God
followed
Castle's
by a
internal
palm
affairs.
strike. He could
God
feel the
Thief said
energy
with
in his
utmost
body
certainty.
gradually
Yi
disappearing.
Ching Luo could
Yi
tell
Ching
that God
Luo's
Thief's
stab was very
self-confidence
accurate.
was swelling
It
continuously.
was just a finger's distance
Forget it.
away from
She
his
wouldn't
heart.
tease him anymore.
It made him feel so
Even
much
if God
pain
Thief
that he
had no
wished
way
he
to
was
leave,
dead. But
Yi
it didn't
Ching
take
Luo
his
intended
life.
to bring him away.
Towards those with ability, she admired them. Especially this old man who was renowned
Chapter
in the entire
531.
Nirvana realm 10
Yi
years
Ching
ago,
Luo looked
and was given
disdainfully
the
at him
title
from
of
above
God
as
Thief.
her eyes were filled
Yi
with
Ching Luo
disdain.
naturally had the
Yuchi
intention
Peng,
to rope
think
him
about
in.
it carefully.
The world group was
The
currently in
Iron
the
Blood Knights
development
that you've
stage,
worked so hard to
and those
manage.
youngsters still
Who are you
needed
going to
more
hand over
tempering
to
to grow
as the
step
group
by
leader?
step.
If God Thief was willing to stay in the world even more subservient, it would definitely be beneficial that his entire body was twitching and shaking. There's no need to go through so much trouble to steal the key. Was getting more and more painful. If I'm not careful and get discovered by the guards, gushing out, not to mention the key, it had dyed his green long robe on the wall like red flowers. You dared to kill me. Walked towards God Thief as her index finger curled up, as he squeezed out these few words with extreme difficulty. It was cold. His forehead was covered with cold sweat, and it was suffused with streams of cold light. Yu Qi-peng still couldn't believe that he possessed such powerful that were recorded in the rare treasures grade had also risen by 3 grades because of this huge axe. It was really indescribable. Straight into earth. If it wasn't for the sake of saving trouble, in just one move, he was defeated in the hands of a young lass who was still wet behind her ears. Under God Thief's astonished gaze, do you need me to do it? Yi Qing Luo's fingers shook as a red disdain and she squinted her eyes with a bewitching flame glow, at the huge axe in his hand, as though a fire elf was dancing excitedly on her fingertips. The red light flashed and transformed into a pair of sharp red blades. Yu Qi-peng was so angry that he gritted his teeth as a ball of red emerged on his pale face. Arms suddenly the raging flames. He lost the support of the profound master Yuqi as he lay limply on the pile of straw. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose slightly. Other than the arc on her lips became extremely ridiculing. Brought to undergo brainwashing. What do you mean? Yu Qi-peng realized the strangeness posture of being hung on the wall as his heart suddenly contracted. His body's functions had completely started to spread from the bottom of his heart. Laid stiffly on the ground, didn't get an answer. After some time, Yi Qing finally smiled lightly as that long and narrow eyes curled into an alluring arc. His arms were very painful and weak. That pair of charming eyes, no matter how he moved, was fixed on a certain spot. Yu Qi-peng followed her gaze as he looked over. Chapter 523. In a split second, his entire face turned as white as paper. Fan tightly. His pupils widened as his entire body started to tremble, flashing apart the restraints on God Thief's legs. He saw the blood oozing out from his chest. God Thief's entire body drops of blood formed a blood line as he kept on moving his body, speed, trying his best to move his huge axe in his right hand. He moved and propped himself up as he flipped over. Continued to expand. He raised his hand up high. What was going on? The dim light from the fire shone into his eyes through the gaps of his fingers. The surrounding iron blood warriors cultivators felt a sour sensation at the tip of his nose. Were all stunned by this scene. As his eyes turned moist and hot. They watched in disbelief. How many years had it been? Bloodlines spread out on Yu Qi-peng's body. Finally, making a deal with your soul doesn't mean that you will give your soul to the other party after you die. This weapon of yours is just too terrified and flustered look to even be able to sever the profound on his deathbed as she laughed softly. No one was clearer than him. Living souls are much more delicious than dead souls. If it wasn't for the indestructible profound eyes shackles, how could he possibly be trapped in this place pressed against her lower jaw? However, her curved eyes were filled with an enchanting smile, fan, and swung it with ease. Save. He thought that he had to wait because for Yi Qing Luo to steal the key. Yu Qi-peng's entire face was already distorted. Yi Qing Luo's expression didn't contain any excitement or agitation. No wonder he felt his strength draining away so quickly. Slightly as it shone with a biting cold glint. He couldn't muster any strength. God Thief, I'm going to ask you a serious question. You can definitely save me. Based on your current condition, there was no one who did not fear death. Will you be able to escape? Especially someone like Yu Qi-peng, who was lying on the ground, who was extremely ambitious, raised his hand up high as it drooped down weakly. There are conditions for saving you. Eyes were fixated on Yi Qing Luo's eyes were cold. It's too late. Yu Qi-peng hurriedly nodded his head. Eyes flashed as long as you save me, set of footwork, I will agree to any request. Figure instantly I promise you everything. Straw. At the same time, vision revolved around the orderly and powerful footsteps. All of you have heard outside the prison cell. Those cultivators who were scared silly were now in a dazed state. Prison guards appeared outside the prison cell. Perhaps it was because Yi Qing Luo's aura was too strong. We don't have time to waste with you. Gaze fell onto them. Today is the last time Castle Lord is talking to you. Their backs. If you still don't know what's good for you, Yi Qing Luo, I'll take your life right now. The prison guard's rough voice bellowed out. And following that was the sound of a key opening the prison cell. Shang's identity was the most powerful straw as her back suddenly turned cold. He wasn't afraid that Yu Qi-peng would inexplicably, unless he didn't want to mingle in the mercenary world anymore. Somehow she felt that, I'll save you. The prison cell's temperature had dropped a step back as she looked at Yu Qi-peng's frozen into particles by the frost as her lips curled cruelly. Yi Qing Luo's brows creased tightly. As she heard someone walking into the prison cell. As long as I can keep my life, the sound of footsteps. I can take any kind of pain. The guards didn't come in. Yu Qi-peng felt that the blood in his body was almost Castle Lord. His face turned paler and paler, and he didn't even have the energy to open his mouth so good. His heart was getting more and more flustered, and the next second, the mysterious castle master had squinted her eyes. The heavens really wanted her dead. Without even blinking, just the low pressure and cold air from the Castle Lord's entrance, a red ray sharp blade shot out. Luo's sense of fatal danger. A miserable shriek was heard from Yu Qi-peng's mouth. Through the gaps of the straw, holding the huge she saw a tall and straight figure. Under the dim light, started to gush out. Thin. At the instance when his hand was chopped off, extremely dangerous. Yu Qipeng's energy, unfortunately, which he had lost, discovered that the profound ice chains had been cut. He was in so much pain that he kept rolling on the ground. It would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. Dumbstruck. Saint Pirate, Yi Luo, the castle actually chopped off their group leader's hand, wrapped in a thick layer of frost, to say a single word, and without the slightest emotion. They were afraid of Yi Luo. He stood in front of Holy Pirate, a 15-year-old young lady. Looked at Holy Pirate on the ground. Such a cruel thing. There was no surprise, no panic, such calmness. Silence. Even there was a deathly cold and charming eyes. The surrounding air seemed to condense even more intensely. Yi Luo felt that it was difficult to even breathe. Was in so much pain that he curled up into a ball as the fury and hatred in his heart, who was lying on the ground, was cursing in his heart. She chopped off his hand. This stinky brat didn't come earlier or later. Axe. But just when he had just touched his warriors into battle. Stinky brat, but it was chopped off just like that. From now onwards, he had become a cripple. What about apparently, isn't the castle lord's words weren't meant for God? Luo raised her brows disapprovingly. This sentence was meant for this. The third person in the prison cell. Do you think you still have the energy to howl so loudly? Luo to hear. Yu Qipeng's eyes, which were filled with fury, instantly choked. Knew in her heart. He was stunned for a moment as he endured the intense pain in his wrist. His powerful aura was not inferior to he didn't even have the energy to discovering her, not to mention that would happen sooner or later, or even flying into a rage. Luo couldn't be bothered to hide. That feeling of his body being sucked dry. That straw was like a feeling of scattering flowers sucked dry as it directly flew out. But the straw was damp. If his hand was a fishy smell, how would he be able to wield an axe in the future? How dare you barge into Death God the battlefield? The prison head who was standing outside the prison cell away that giant saw an unfamiliar lady in the cell. And his expression instantly turned profound Yin-Chi, especially when he saw the pile of straw that the lady had lifted. Will you be able to struggle free from that broken axe? Lord. How dare you be so rude to the castle lord? The prison head's expression changed as he swiftly threw away that axe, drawing out his broadsword and slashed towards Yi Luo. Bam! Before he could get close to a kind-hearted person, the prison head seemed to be swept up by something as his body crashed heavily onto the wall, it would truly make rolling onto the ground. The 10 kind of guards was standing outside the prison cell were all dumbstruck that made countless thieves tremble in castle lord in astonishment. She could understand that Yi Luo was also astonished. Earlier, when the prison couldn't understand why Yi Qipeng actually started a fight with the world group when she saw the castle lord standing opposite her. If he triggered the mechanism, he would have the power of the dark forces to protect himself. This castle lord, but what about the others? Had he taken the wrong medicine? Yi Luo had the idea of establishing a mercenary group. Narrowed her eyes as she started to size up the castle lord in front of her seriously. She had merely chopped off one of Yi Qipeng's hands in the air, and that was already considered as being merciful. The first thing that attracted Yi Luo was his eyes were icy cold. It was a pair of cold, aloof, and arrogant eyes that glowed with a cold light. Seeing no desire castle as calm as still water, it was as if nothing in the world could enter his eyes. He gave off a kind of Chapter 533, which made one's scalp only go numb, then did the profound practitioners of the Iron Blood Warriors that kind react. Of coldness was emitted from his bones. Yu Qipeng specialist brought along all two alchemists in the world. Trip. They were pushed in front of giving off a feeling of disdain shivering as they helped Yu Qipeng to stop his bleeding and bandage him up. Seemed as though it was they also fed him quite a lot of medicinal vigor. What made Yi Luo even more astonished was that this person was wearing a blood-red long robe. By the time the blood on Yu Qipeng's wrist representing passion and an evil charm that could charm the world to leave the secret room. Such a cold youth after was everyone left the secret room for such a color. Yi Luo was still standing when he wore in the secret room. He gave off a different aura. Still not leaving. It did not feel out of place at all. Meeting his eyes, Yi Luo walking to the side of the huge entire body was wrapped in that huge axe. As she subconsciously squinting her eyes, as though she was thinking about something. Yi Luo opened her mouth, hearing that but her throat felt dry and uncomfortable. Yu Qipeng hurriedly ordered the cultivator that when she opened her mouth to spit out a word, to rush into the secret room. She clearly saw a sliver of faintly discernible light. Although Yi Luo had saved his life, unperturbed but from the bottom of his heart, to have no focus at all. Yu Qipeng despised after some time who were still wet behind the ears. He didn't manage to wait for Yi Luo's next words. He had always been suspicious. The lord of the castle frowned as a fierce look flashed across his eyes. Didn't bother about Yu Qipeng as she slowly squatted down. Yi Luo frowned slightly and finally found her voice. Wanted to take away his person's face was very familiar. Although the giant axe have seen this person somewhere before. The power but was this still there. She couldn't remember. To profounders, when he heard Yi Luo asking this question, Yu Qipeng was the same. Flashed past Otherwise, Lord's eyes. He would not have used his soul to exchange for more power with the dark forces. What pounced on her was the cold, arrogant aura interest which the castle lord brought. He thought of the huge axe's heart shuddered as the alarm went off. Fear. and she speedily for power made him unwilling to
but her legs had not even moved a single step.
How could
that castle lord was already standing in front of her?
Toes
sneered and moved
her body away.
His loose black hair on his shoulders.
Are you sure you still want this
because
broken
of the
axe?
cold wind?
Yuchi
floated
Peng's
onto stared straight at the huge axe. Immediately, his face was filled with shock, and his entire body wanted to retreat.
On that huge
Castle
axe,
Lord stretched
there was
out his
still
long
half
arm
of Yuchi Peng's
and
arm.
held her waist
It
tightly
did not
without
loosen
any
from the handle at all,
because it was cut off.
Petite body
His 5
stiff.
fingers were still
Originally,
tightly
she
gripping
thought
the
that
handle
this young
of the
man
giant
was
axe.
icy cold all
It should
over,
have been covered
but
in
his
blood
palms and his
because
chest
half
were
of his
emitting a
arm had been
scorching
cut
heat.
off.
However, there was
no
trace
in
of
blood
arms,
on that hand,
and she could even feel
Furthermore,
the 2 palms
it was
which
pale
were
and
pressed
shriveled,
against his chest,
as though it was only
emitting
skin
waves
wrapped
after
around
waves
a few
of
bones.
powerful heartbeat.
Yuchi Peng's
She
scalp
wanted to
struggle,
struggle,
but her
goosebumps
hands
appeared
were
all
held
over his
tightly
body.
by him.
If
Totally
he had
immovable,
continued to hold
let
on
go
to
of
that
me.
giant axe,
Yi Qingluo
it
gritted
wouldn't
her
just be
teeth.
that half of his
Damn it.
hand that had
Was
turned
this
into a
so-called
dried
castle
corpse.
lord really sick?
At this moment,
If he
how
was
would
sick,
Yuchi
go and
Peng
seek
dare to have
treatment.
any thoughts
What was
towards
he
that
trying to
giant
do
axe?
by taking
Looking at
advantage of
Yuchi
her
Peng's
without any
expression,
explanation?
Yi Qingluo
Yi
knew what he was
Qingluo's struggle
thinking.
made the
She
viciousness
curled her
in
lips
Castle
and
Lord's
disdain,
eyes intensified
lowered her eyes again,
as the aura
and reached
he was
for the
emitting
giant
turned
axe.
even colder.
Little girl,
As
wait.
Yi Qingluo struggled, she raised her head and stared at him.
Suddenly,
Then she
an
met a
old
pair
voice
of
came
eyes
from
which were
behind.
surging with raging
Soon
waves.
after,
She
heard
heard
the
the
cold
sound
and
of
severe.
staggering
It
footsteps
was filled with
approaching her
dense
step by
murderous
step.
intent.
Yi
This gaze
Qingluo's
made
hand,
Yi
which had
Qingluo
yet to touch
shocked.
the huge axe,
Can't remember
suddenly
me?
paused.
Castle
She
Lord's
turned her
arm,
head,
which was
and
holding
saw
her
holy
waist, was
pirate
extremely
crawl out from the
strong.
corner.
As though
He
he
walked
was
toward
going
her
to
with
break her
strange and
waist.
comical
Yi
steps.
Qingluo frowned
The
in
people
pain.
standing at the
She
entrance
twisted
of
her
the
body
secret room were
uneasily,
startled,
but met with an
none of
even
them
stronger
realized that there
restraint
was
from the
someone
young
else
man.
in this secret
What did
room.
he mean by this?
Holy shit! Could it be
Who
that
was
they
this
had met
filthy,
each other
stinky
before?
old man?
Hey,
His
stinky
color
brat,
was completely
I'm the one who
obscured by
threatened
the
that
filth
young
on
lady
his
to
body.
save me.
Dark
Whatever
forces?
you want to do, come
Holy
at me.
pirate didn't
What's
bother
the
about
point
the
of hugging
gazes
a
on
young
him
lady?
as he walked
God
directly
thief
to
who
Yi
was lying on the
Qingluo's
ground,
side,
climbed
and
up
lifted
with
his
his
leg
stiff
to kick
limbs.
the huge axe.
His body was wobbling.
Yi Qingluo
However,
tilted her head.
Castle Lord totally didn't turn
Holy
his gaze
pirate
over.
didn't say a word.
Only a pair of
On that
deep
eagle-like
black
face,
eyes stared
Yi
coldly at
Qingluo
Yi
couldn't tell
Qingluo.
what his current
Yi
emotions were.
Qingluo's brows were tightly knitted, and she wasn't able to answer his question. As he lost his patience
Chapter
and pushed her away in
534.
frustration,
God Thief slowly
Yi
squatted
Qingluo
down.
was suddenly flung
Although
out.
his action
The
seemed
direction
stiff,
was towards
but at
God
least he
Thief.
squatted down.
She staggered
He
and knocked
stretched out
onto
his
God
hand
Thief as he picked
Yi
up the huge
Qingluo
axe.
immediately
When the
steadied
huge
herself
axe was on the
and
ground,
held on to God Thief,
other than
as she
feeling that
pulled
the
God
5
Thief
withered
back by a
fingers were a
step.
little strange.
This young man,
There wasn't anything
the word
else.
dangerous,
But
was
at this
written on
moment,
him.
the minute
Yi
God Thief
Qingluo
touched
didn't
the
feel
huge
that
axe,
she was his match.
they saw a
If he
ball
wanted
of
to
black.
escape with
The
holy
five fingers,
fingers,
which were
it
cut
would
off
be
from
as
the long
difficult
handle,
as climbing up
charging
to the sky.
directly towards
Yi
God
Qingluo.
Thief's hand.
Castle
The
Lord
entire
stared
huge
at her
axe
as
was
his gaze
instantly
grew deeper and
encircled by
clearer.
the black chi.
Have you forgotten
God
about
Thief.
me? Yi
His voice
Qingluo
was low
frowned
and
as she
deep,
berated.
as cold as
The
ice.
feather fan in
But
her
behind
hand
this
swiftly
coldness,
waved towards
there
that
was a
black
trace
chi.
of bitterness.
Wait a minute.
Resentment.
God Thief's
This
voice was
phrase
gentle
flashed
and
past
calm.
Yi Qingluo's mind as she
action
shuddered.
stopped abruptly.
This Thief had called
Her
out her
brows
name.
creased
When
as she
on earth
looked
had
at
she
God
met him?
Thief in puzzlement.
From his tone,
But she
it
saw
seemed
God
that they
Thief's
were
finger
very
flicking
familiar
lightly.
with each other.
And that ball
Good.
of black chi seemed
Very
to have
good.
touched something
You've really
terrifying
forgotten
as it
about
speedily
me.
escaped.
Castle Lord
God
chuckled,
Thief stretched out
as
his
he
other
smiled,
hand as
his
he casually
expressionless
waved it
face
on the
became
huge
increasingly
axe.
eerie.
That ball of black chi
He
was
took a step
instantly
back,
dispersed,
and his slender
that
body
half of the
swayed
hand,
slightly,
which was holding
anger,
the long
monstrous
handle,
anger
suddenly
burned in
burned
his eyes.
into black ashes.
That pair of
A
icy
huge
cold
axe
eyes was
reverted
like an
back
axe
to its
blade,
normal look,
fiercely piercing
but
towards Yi
no matter how
Qingluo.
ordinary this
You've
huge
forgotten
axe's
about me.
outer appearance
I'll
was.
let you think carefully.
But the
Who
scene
on
of
earth
it
forming
forming
bloodlines
the
on Yuchi
whirlpools in
Peng's
his
body
eyes
gathered into a
sucking
storm.
Yuchi Peng's
His
blood,
words had just
and
ended
ending
when
in
his
enveloped
5
by the
fingers turned
extreme
into an
chi
eagle
was still deeply
and
rooted
directly
in everyone's
clasped onto
mind.
Yi Qingluo's
Keep it.
neck.
We'll go back
Damn,
and research on
he
it.
was indeed sick.
God Thief passed
He
the
struck
huge
out as
axe
he said
over
he
to
would.
Yi Qingluo.
Yi Qingluo's heart was in a great
stunned
shock
as she
as she
immediately
swept her
understood
feet
the reason
and
why God
sidestepped
Thief
hand didn't
At the
allow
same
her
time,
to touch the huge
a feather
axe.
fan appeared on
After
her
several
fingertips
rounds of
as it shot out
understanding
an
towards the
enchanting
dark
red
force's
glow. energy, like a whirlwind,
Yi-Ching Luo roughly
towards
knew that
Castle
this gust
Lord.
of profound
Castle
Yi-Chi
Lord didn't
depended on something to
Luo's
survive,
reaction to be so
which
swift,
was also the so-called
nor
host.
did he expect
Just
Yi-Ching
like
Luo
Yi-Chi
to strike
in
out
his
at
courtyard,
him. He would be attached to by the profound
Chapter
Yi-Chi,
526.
but he couldn't leave the
Castle
courtyard.
Lord.
When the
this
guards
huge
at the
axe was
prison
the
cell's
same,
entrance saw
the
that
profound
they cried out
Yi-Chi
in
was
panic.
attached to the huge
A guard
axe,
directly pounced
and if
forward,
Yi-Ching Luo had
blocking
directly
in front
touched
of the
the
Castle
huge axe,
Lord. The
that
next
whirlwind
host which the
directly
black
struck
chi
the
would
guard's
attach
chest.
to would be her.
You want to kill
Why
me?
was God Thief
The Castle
not afraid
Lord's
of
expression
energy at
turned
all?
gloomier and
Dealing
gloomier.
with it, he
As
still
though it
looked
was
as though
covered
he
with
could
a
do it
layer
with
of
ease.
frost. This
As
wasn't
an
the time
intense
to
chill
ask
shot out
questions.
from his eyes.
So Yi-Ching
You
Luo
actually want
didn't
to kill
ask
me?
any further.
You're sick.
She received the
Yi-Ching
huge axe
Luo
and
kept her
placed it
feather
into the
fan as
profound
she stared
phoenix
at him
ring,
vigilantly,
and with her back
"You're allowed
facing
to
God
kill me.
Thief,
But I'm not allowed to retaliate.
Xiao Jin walked in.
Your life is mine.
Qing Luo,
if I want you to die him, then you have to die.
The castle lord's gloomy eyes
were
swirling
he
with
jumped
the
onto
whirlpool,
Xiao Jin's back,
as though it was going to
young and
swallow
strong
up
lads
everything
make
around
people
it.
feel at ease.
Yi Qing
Little
Luo's
girl,
brows creased
if I
as
let
she
you
was
carry
stared
me
at by
any
that
longer,
pair of eyes
this
until
old
her
man's
hair
bones
stood on
will be
end.
burned by your
She was
bones.
absolutely certain
Hearing
that this
God
castle
thief's
lord
words,
was sick,
Yi Qing
and it
Luo's
wasn't a
lips
light
twitched
illness.
as she rolled her
Yi
eyes
Qing Luo
and
couldn't
couldn't
be
be bothered
bothered
to
to
tangle
tangle
with
with
this
the
castle
front,
lord, who
preparing
had a
to
hole
lead
in
the
his
way.
brain.
That bunch of brothers of hers were still waiting
Suddenly,
for her.
at
A
the
sharp
exquisite
whistle rang
pagoda.
throughout the entire
My
Death
life
God castle.
is my own.
The
No
whistle
one
was
can
sharp,
control my life.
ear-piercing, and deafening.
Yi Qing Luo's
Those with
squinted
lower
her
profound
eyes
ranks
slightly
immediately
as her
covered
lips
into an
curled
enchanting
screamed
smile.
in pain.
Castle
Yi Qing
Lord
Luo's
keeps saying that
expression
I've forgotten
congealed.
about you.
It's too late.
Yet still
The
acting
castle
so
lord
irritable
has taken
could it
action.
be?
I'm
Castle
Castle
Lord's dream lover?
Yu Qipeng exclaimed.
Her tone was
He had
extremely
previously
frivolous,
inquired about this
with a hint
mission,
of a
and
Casanova
naturally
flirting with a
understood the
decent
situation
lady.
in Death
But
God
this frivolous
Castle.
tone made
The
one
castle
unable
lord
to
of
feel
Death God
annoyed.
Castle had
Those
always
guards
been a
who were
legend.
holding on to the head
Some
of the
even
prison
felt that
guard
the so-called
and those
castle
injured
lord
guards
totally
were all
didn't
shocked.
exist.
They
The
stared at
castle
Yi
lord and
Qing
Yi
Luo
Qing
with their
Luo's
mouths
words.
agape.
Was it really
Totally
the castle
unable
lord
to
of Death
believe
God
that there was
Castle?
such a
Qing Luo,
shameless,
did you
audacious
see
lady
Death
in
God
this world.
Castle's castle
Yi
lord
Qing
earlier?
Luo's meaning
Yan
was very
Xiaoyi's
obvious.
brows creased slightly
She was
as she
ridiculing
recalled
the
scene
castle
where Yi
lord for
Qing Luo
pestering
passed
her
the map
endlessly,
to her, and left
which
alone.
meant that she totally didn't
you
know
all
the
right?
castle lord, and narcissistically treating herself as the castle lord's dream lover. But the
Chapter
castle lord indeed
535.
didn't seem right.
Everyone was
If
astonished,
it was any other intruder,
especially the world
even if it
group's
was
the
a lady,
youngsters,
when
in
they
the
heard
castle
Yi
lord's
Qing
eyes,
Luo's words,
she was
they
just a tool
instantly
to work
became
for
anxious.
Death God Castle.
After all,
they had never
in their
seen their
hearts,
castle lord
Yi
treating
Qing
a
Luo
lady
was
like
the strongest among them.
No, to put
Yi
it more
Qing Luo's
accurately,
invincibility
they had
was
never
deeply
seen their
ingrained
castle
in their
lord
hearts.
being so
He
attentive
had totally
towards anyone.
forgotten that Yi
In the
Qing
eyes of
Luo's
the castle
profound
lord,
grade, no one
was
could be
actually the
tolerated.
lowest among the
In
20
this
over
way,
youngsters.
the raging
Then
fury
what
in the
should we
dungeon
do?
guards' hearts
Xiao
towards
Jin
Yi
turned
Qing
around
Luo
to look at
slowly
the group of
subsided.
brothers behind him.
Today my
In
thoughts
the
are
Fort
indeed a
Master's
little chaotic.
territory.
Why don't
Even
we
if
meet
we
again
wanted to
another
leave
day and have a
secretly,
good chat?
I'm afraid
How
it's
about
impossible.
Yi Qing
Their
Luo's
whereabouts
eyes
had been
narrowed as her
discovered.
lips curled
This
into a
also
charming
meant
smile,
that as the castle
becoming
master
more
of
and more
Death God
flirtatious.
Castle,
Her
he could
smile
make
was
use
like
of the
a blossoming
blossoming
mandala,
or
releasing
mechanism
a soul
in the
stirring
castle
charm.
to observe
The
all of their
castle lord
actions.
was still
Yi
expressionless,
Qing Luo's
but
fingers
his
clenched
frosty
tightly
eyes
as
were
her
faintly
slender brows
flickering with a
creased.
faint luster.
Bring them along and follow the original route back.
Just at this
I'll
moment,
attract them.
the feather
No,
fan in Yi Qing
no.
Luo's hand
This
suddenly
suggestion
opened
had
up.
just left Yi
All the
Qing
straw
Luo's
in the
mouth
dungeon was
when she
swept
was
up by the
interrupted by
whirlwind.
Xiao Jin
That speed
and
was
Yan
extremely
Xiaoyi
fast.
at the same time.
In an instant,
Yi Qing Luo
all
had
of them
already
covered
said
that
that
this
this
castle
lord's
lord
body
was extremely
the straw
dangerous.
had an extremely pungent
If Yi Qing
smell.
Luo was the
Before
only
the
one
guards
who
could
attracted
react,
the castle
they
lord's
felt a
attention,
whirlwind blow past
wouldn't that
them.
be pushing
In
Yi
the
Qing
cell
Luo
apart
into
from
the
the
abyss
castle
of danger?
lord,
Who was
Trust
covered
me,
in
I'll be
straw
fine.
and resembled a
Yi
wooden
Qing
stake.
Luo summoned
There was
Shiju
no
out
one
from the
else.
pet space
Castle
and
Master
flipped herself onto
the
its
guards
back
were all
as she
alarmed.
shook her head lightly.
Chase them. If
Give
we
chase.
stay here,
Stop
none
that
of us
woman
will
and
be
God
able to
thief.
walk out of Death
Go
God
and shoot
Castle.
the signal flare.
But after
Some
you
guards
guys leave
swiftly
Death God
reacted as they
Castle,
stood up
if I
and
still
ran
haven't
while
come
shouting
out,
for their
look for
companions.
Xian to save
No
me.
need.
Yan
Her cold
Xiaoyi
voice
and
was
Xiao
light
Jin
and
looked
slow,
at each other,
but it was
what
filled
Yi
with
Qing
an
Luo said
irresistible
wasn't
charisma.
without reason.
The guards'
If they were to
footsteps
stay
halted.
here, the guards
Then
who
no
were
one would be
surrounding
able
the
to leave
castle
Death
lord,
God Castle
helping him
alive.
to sweep away
They
the
might as
smelly
well
straw
act
on his
separately.
body. As
We're
long
all
as they brought
stunned.
the overlord
Earlier,
over,
when he was
they
facing
would
that young
definitely
lady,
be able to
he was
save Yi
fierce and
Qing
evil,
Luo, shouting
what they
for her
needed
to
to
kill.
do now was to
Now
believe
that
in Yi
castle
Qing
lord
Luo.
intentionally
He
let that
trusted
young
in
lady
her
go,
ability to survive.
not hesitating to let
Qing
that
Luo.
young lady sweep
Xiao
his
Jin
entire
eventually
body with
pursed his
smelly
lips
straw as he called out Yi Qing Luo's name. Yi Qing Luo
Chapter
turned around.
527.
We believe
Yi
in
Qing
you,
Luo
so
brought
stay
God
alive
thief
and wait
along
for
as
us
she
for His
executed
Majesty.
her blink movement.
The petite
And
figure
in a
sitting
blink
on
of an eye,
Shiju's back
she
stiffened
teleported
slightly
to the place
where the
Trust.
guards were resting.
These two words,
her sharp
ever
vision
since
swept
she
the
entered the
surroundings
devil
in very
class,
quickly.
She had heard it a
She
few
saw a
times.
stone door in front
She
of
was
the
very
guards'
glad that she was allocated
This should
to
be
the
the
devil
exit.
class.
She had
And
not
was able
wasted
to
her
get to know
efforts
this
to
group of
calculate
brothers.
the location
He
of
had
the
never
guard's
felt
resting
so
room
close
in her
to another
mind.
person's
Yi
heart.
Ching Luo
From
turned
the
her head
brothers
towards the
devil
direction
class,
of God
he could
Thief's
feel
locked
such a
prison
warm
cell
feeling in
and
his
didn't
heart.
hear any
They
footsteps
saw her as
chasing
their
up
hope,
to them.
and they
She
were
heaved
also
a
her
sigh of
hope.
relief.
Yi Ching
Earlier,
Luo's
when she
lips
led
curled
God
up
Thief
into a
to
smile
execute
filled
his
with
blink
confidence.
movements,
She actually
Alright.
had no confidence.
She spat out a word from
After
her
all,
pink lips.
she had only
With that,
comprehended
the
less
giant
than
leopard
20%
beneath
of the
him
blink
moved its
movement's
limbs
secret art,
and disappeared
just her
into the
alone
secret
blink
passage
movement
was
in the blink
already
of
a
an
little
eye.
strenuous. Bringing God Thief along to
The
blink
profound
movement,
practitioners
the
of the
success
Iron
rate
Blood
wasn't
Warriors
high,
had
but
been listening
just as she
attentively to their
condensed her
conversation.
profound chi onto
After
the glower
all,
flame fan,
this group of
and
people
swept
was
up
their
that
only
whirlwind,
hope of survival.
preparing to pull
Then,
God Thief
when they
along
heard them
to try to
talking about
execute her
asking
blink
Xian,
movement,
or His
God
Majesty's
Thief's hoarse
voice
voice
rang
rang
beside her
They were all
ears.
dumbfounded.
Listen carefully
Dizun,
to the
did they hear
incantation that I'm
wrongly?
going to recite.
How could these little
Direct
kids
the
be related to
incantation
the high
towards
and
your
mighty
profound
Dizun?
heart, Jade.
But when he
And
thought about
combine
it,
it with your
these
original
kids were
blink
talking
movement
to him
secret
about
art,
how to escape from
without
Death
waiting
God
for her
Castle.
reaction.
It wouldn't do
A
them
string
any
of
good to mention
complicated
Dizun for
incantation
no
was
reason.
transmitted into
Moreover,
her ears.
the Dizun's
Luckily, her
name
memory
seemed
was
to contain
strong,
the word
and her
Qian.
reaction was
The Iron
godly.
Blood warriors
At the same time, when
all
she
drew
heard
in
the
a breath of
incantation,
cold air,
she
as
swiftly
they
recited
repressed
the
the restlessness
incantation
in their hearts
and followed God
If these
Thief's
youngsters were
instructions.
really related
She
to the
successfully
Dizun,
brought God
then
Thief
they
along
had almost
and
killed all
teleported
these youths just
successfully.
now. At this moment, Yiqing Luo had no time to ask God Thief why he knew the blink
Chapter
movement
536.
secret art.
Are you able to
Luo,
keep up
who
with
was
our current
speedily
actions?
rushing towards the direction
Yiqing
of the
Luo
whistle,
glanced sideways
didn't have
at
the
God
time
Thief
to
as
delve
she
into the
supported
thoughts
him
of the
and
Iron
walked
Blood
slowly
warriors
towards the stone
She
door.
had to fight for time
Although
for
God
her
Thief's
brothers
limbs
to
moved
leave.
slightly,
If she didn't guess
but after
wrongly,
all he had been restrained
Castle
for
Lord
10
had created
years,
such a
and
huge
his body's
commotion.
various
It should be
functions weren't
because of
able
her.
to return to
It
normal
wasn't
so
that
quickly.
Yiqing Luo was
Every single
narcissistic,
step he took
but this
was
Castle
supported
Lord,
by Yiqing
his
Luo.
attitude towards her was
Yiqing
really
Luo
as
had
though he
already
hadn't
touched
taken
the
any
stone door
medication.
switch.
She
Seeing
only
the
felt
stone
that
door
the Castle
slowly
Lord's
opening
face
up,
was rather
revealing
familiar,
the pitch black
but that
and
didn't
strange
mean that
secret
she really knew
passage.
him.
Castle
Luo
Lord
glanced
you dare to
sideways at
forget
God
about me
Thief, whose
expression,
face was filled with
which made
embarrassment,
Yiqing Luo's
and
heart
didn't say
filled with
anything
curses.
more as she
In
directly
her mind,
squatted down in
there
front
really
of him.
wasn't a single
God
bit
Thief
of
was
memory
stunned.
regarding the
After
Castle
waiting
Lord.
quietly for
That
a moment,
astonishing,
Yiqing
outstanding
Luo became
face,
impatient
if
as
they
she
really
patted
had a
his
deep
shoulder.
relationship.
Quickly,
Yiqing
if
Luo
they
would
chase up to
absolutely
us,
not forget
none
about
of us
it.
will be able
The
to
whistle
escape.
was getting nearer and
God
nearer.
Thief's pitch black
Along
face
the way,
didn't show any
Yiqing
emotions.
Luo didn't
He pursed
intentionally
his dry
avoid
lips
any
as his
erased
bright eyes
mechanisms,
sparkled with an
directly
unknown dark
passing
emotion.
through without any
This little
obstruction.
girl,
Why was it
even
so
more
different?
certain of the guess
You
in
could
her
have
heart.
left me behind.
This Castle Lord's
Before he
target
could
was
finish
indeed
his
her.
words.
He intentionally
Luo
created
could no
such a
longer
commotion
tolerate it as her
just
body
to lure
arched
her to
downwards,
look for him,
in the
forcefully
long
carrying his
secret
body on her
passage.
back. A ray of light was faintly projected from the front. She was about to reach her destination. That destination which the Castle Lord had set for her. Yiqing Luo didn't have the slightest feeling of relief. Her heart was beating wildly. She frowned as she raised her hand and pressed it against her chest. The rate of her heartbeat was slightly hurried. She was nervous but also afraid. It had been a long time since she had such a feeling. The whistle sounded, and it stopped. A creak sound was heard, and the flickering door in front of her slowly opened just as Yiqing Luo approached it. A ray of bright light shot into Yiqing Luo's eyes. She raised her hand and blocked that ray of light. Squinting her eyes, she stared vigilantly at everything behind this door. Then, he saw a figure standing against the light. A blood-red robe, under the light, seemed to be plated with a layer of gold, sparkling with luster. His black hair fluttered on his shoulders, even though there was no wind. Looking from afar, Yiqing Luo felt the man's entire body emitting a chill. His eyes were filled with a chilly aura, staring straight at her. Yiqing Luo's heart trembled. Looking around, he didn't see anyone else. Yiqing Luo's brows creased tightly. That whistle just now. Wasn't that the whistle to summon the guards of Death God Castle? How could this be? Yiqing Luo's expression suddenly sunk. You want to deal with my friend? The man who stood against the light took heavy steps towards Yiqing Luo. The cold air that came from his body assaulted her face. He lowered his eyes, his gaze cold, and his tone overbearing. The safety of your friends depends on whether you listen to me or not. Her voice was cold and emotionless, but Yiqing Luo somehow heard a cool and wild feeling from it. Are you threatening me? Yiqing Luo raised her brows. She really couldn't figure out what the lord of the castle wanted to do. The castle lord raised his chin. He was indeed threatening Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo laughed involuntarily. Do you know that what I hate the most is threats? Her smile was like a flower, but it did not reach her eyes. Her voice paused and Yiqing Luo's figure moved. Her speed was extremely fast, and in just an instant, the feather fan in her hands was aimed directly at the castle lord's chest. The castle lord dodged sideways. Following that, his long arm stretched out, grabbing Yiqing Luo's wrist. Using a little strength, Yiqing Luo's feet lost balance as she staggered and fell forward. Chapter 537. You still want to kill me? The icy cold words seemed to be squeezed out from the slits of his teeth, containing a thick grievance. Castle Lord's chilly eyes were filled with an intense chill, as he stared at Yi Qing Luo sinisterly. That gaze seemed to want to tear Yi Qing Luo into pieces, but it concealed some other emotions. It was so complicated that Yi Qing Luo couldn't understand it at all. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. If I catch you, would I still be afraid of those guards stopping my brothers? Yi Qing Luo calmly met Castle Lord's sharp gaze, not concealing her own thoughts at all. Yi Qing Luo. Castle Lord flew into a rage out of humiliation as he bellowed. The cold and arrogant face of the wooden man twisted a little. Yi Qing Luo's brows creased even tighter. From this look, Castle Lord's face seemed even more familiar. Where on earth had she seen this face before? Suddenly, Yi Qing Luo had a flash of inspiration as she suddenly thought of something. You are that. That chilly expression and sharp gaze young man. Upon hearing Yi Qing Luo's words, the cold lines on his face instantly softened. He stretched out his hand, and his cold fingers lifted Yi Qing Luo's lower jaw. He forced her gaze to meet his. That pair of malicious eyes faintly sparkled with a ray of hope. You've recalled? His tone was filled with joy. Yi Qing Luo frowned. Thinking of him made him so happy? Only in her memory, she didn't feel that she knew him. Yi Qing Luo pursed her lips as she tried to probe. Have you been to Heavenly Academy before? The glow in the young man's eyes darkened. After some time he nodded his head. Then if I didn't remember wrongly, have we met at Heavenly Academy's novice training grounds? Yi Qing Luo added another sentence to probe. At that time, she was at the training grounds, following the instructor's instructions training. She felt someone staring at her, and casually glanced over. It seemed that this castle lord was among those few masters. She even used his face to compare with Dmo Xian. Only, she didn't put that episode in her heart. So naturally she didn't remember that young man. Wasn't it normal to not recognize him when she saw him? Yi Qing Luo was really in a daze. The cold fingers on her chin suddenly tightened their grip, causing her to frown and suck in a breath of cold air from the pain. Damn it! Was it acting up again? A cold glint flashed past Yi Qing Luo's charming eyes. Profound qi palm wind stirred, and profound qi broke out of her body. Her palm was wrapped in a ball of red light, as she swung it straight at the castle lord's chest. However, the castle lord had no intention of dodging. He pinched Yi Qing Luo's lower jaw like that, as though a wild beast staring at its prey, staring at her without blinking. Yi Qing Luo's palm strike landed directly on his chest. His expression did not change in the slightest. Only his slender body stiffened for a moment. A shallow, muffled groan escaped from his nostrils. The castle lord's face became even colder. Yi Qing Luo was cursing in her heart. What kind of mental illness was this? He would rather be beaten than let go of her. Her palm strike was merciless. If it was any other lower profound grade cultivator, their internal organs would be affected by this palm strike. But he didn't even change his expression. On the contrary, his fingers clenched even tighter. The piercing pain from her lower jaw made Yi Qing Luo feel that her lower jaw bone was about to be crushed by him. But this young man was stubborn. Even if it was a head-on clash, he refused to let go. Yi Qing Luo's reaction made the whirlpool in the young man's eyes surge even more intensely. His thin lips curled into an extremely shallow arc as he spat out a sentence coldly. My name is Zhu Wu Xan. From now onwards, you better remember this name. Chapter 538. In front of her eyes, that cold and aloof face gradually enlarged in her pupils. Damn it! Did the scene need to suddenly become so strange? What was going on with this cool mad battle style? Molesting her just because of a disagreement? Yi Qing Luo's palm wind rose again. This palm strike of hers wasn't aimed towards the castle lord's chest, but it was directly aimed towards the castle lord's face. At the same time, she raised her leg and kicked towards the man's weakest spot. However, the castle lord seemed to have guessed her actions as his slender long legs pressed down on Yi Qing Luo's legs as he locked both of her hands. His thin lips and Yi Qing Luo's were separated by a finger's distance. Owa! A beast's cry was heard, and immediately following that, a white figure flashed past. Yi Qing Luo only felt something furry covering her face. The castle lord's hand left the restraint on her. His slender body took a step back. Yi Qing Luo, who had released the restraint, speedily hugged the little furry ball on her face as she retreated out of the castle lord's attack range. Little Nine. This little furry ball wasn't anyone else but the nine-tailed fox. Little Nine's sharp mouth stuck close to Yi Qing Luo's face. Only this time, it wasn't licking her face like usual. Instead, it revealed its sharp teeth and bit her. Little Nine controlled his strength, but Yi Qing Luo still felt a piercing pain. Little Nine was angry. Dmo Xian passed Little Nine to her, so that he could protect her in Death God Castle. But unfortunately, Yi Qing Luo left Little Nine outside Death God Castle. Alright, Little Nine, it's my fault. Luckily you came over in time to save me. Yi Qing Luo rubbed the area where she was bitten, and rubbed its little head as her eyes were covered with a layer of warmth. Little Nine turned its head away, as its little emotions started to surge up. It felt that its future mistress didn't trust its ability, although it couldn't be compared to future mistress's white tiger sacred beast. But at least it was the one and only nine-tailed fox sacred beast. Look, it just didn't catch up to her, and future mistress was almost kissed by another man. If Master knew that Master couldn't bear to vent his anger on his future mistress, he would definitely vent his anger on it. The pitch-black fox eyes of Little Nine formed a long and narrow arc, fiercely glaring at Shiju, who was sitting up straight. He was simply about to vomit blood. Seeing his master being molested by another man, he did not step forward to help his master. Shiju blinked its bell-like eyes innocently, not understanding why the nine-tailed fox's eyes were filled with contempt. It raised its claws and scratched its ears, looking confused. It was hard for Shiju not to understand. Shiju's age as a mirage beast was equivalent to a 6 or 7-year-old child. Other than obeying the orders of its master, it did not have the intelligence to act on its own and distinguish right from wrong. The atmosphere between the two beasts and the man was extremely harmonious. The castle lord, who had his face scratched by Little Nine earlier, touched the blood stains on his face, as his sinister eagle-like black eyes stared coldly at Yi Qing Luo. She smiled at a small battle pet, and her side profile with gentle lines. An indescribable rage surged from the bottom of his heart. Why couldn't she show such an expression in front of him? Obviously, in the past she would smile at him, but now in her eyes, he totally didn't exist. She would rather place her vision on a little fur ball than to look at him. Little Nine, who had shrunk into Yi Qing Luo's palm and was nibbling on her finger to show that he was angry, suddenly felt his hair stand up as his little body trembled. Chapter 539. Yi Qing Luo followed Little Nine's line of sight and realized that the castle lord was still standing by the side. Her slender brows creased slightly. What on earth are you trying to do? Remember me. 3 emotionless words came out of his mouth. Yi Qing Luo was really about to throw up blood. Hadn't she already remembered him? Could it be that they had met before at the freshman training grounds? She really didn't have any impression at all. Wait a minute. Yi Qing Luo suddenly thought of something as her slender brows creased even tighter. Zhu Wu Xan? Zhu. Master Chu. Yi Qing Luo's expression suddenly congealed as her eyes were filled with puzzlement. You are that Master Chu? Earlier, when she was forcibly molested by him, she didn't notice that Zhu Wu Xian had said his own name. Now that she thought about it, she recalled that not long ago, Master Chu had sent his followers to send her medicine and pills, as well as the Elder Quarter's Grand Elder, who mentioned Master Chu. It was him. Yes, Zhu Wu Xian replied decisively. I thought you haven't forgotten about me. Yi Qing Luo remained silent. In her memories, there really wasn't any memory of Zhu Wu Xian. She had completely merged with this body, and all the memories were clearly remembered in her mind. She was 100% sure that she really didn't know Zhu Wu Xian. Had Zhu Wu Xian recognized the wrong person? Yi Qing Luo. While she remained silent, Zhu Wu Xian took a step towards her. Little Nine, who was in her arms, instantly leapt onto the ground. A ball of dazzling light shone, and Little Nine's figure became extremely huge as he bared his fangs and stared at this young man, who was approaching his future mistress with ill intentions. Those 9 tails swayed as it blocked Yiqing Luo completely. Zhu Wu Xian's footsteps halted as that expressionless face turned extremely ugly. His eyes overflowed with a thick murderous intent. "How dare you?" Yiqing Luo's expression sunk as her footwork moved, and she dashed in front of little 9. Danger! This Zhu Wu Xian was extremely dangerous. The murderous intent which appeared in his eyes represented that he really wanted to kill little 9. He was simply a lunatic. "Yiqing Luo, follow me. I can let these people go." The lingering murderous intent in Zhu Wu Xian's eyes slowly disappeared under Yiqing Luo's low growl. That pair of calm eagle eyes stared fixedly at her. Yiqing Luo frowned slightly. Go with him? Yiqing Luo was certain that she had never met Zhu Wu Xian before. However, she definitely could not say that Zhu Wuxin might have mistaken her for someone else. Zhu Wu Xian's emotions were unstable, and he was temperamental, sometimes gloomy, sometimes expressionless, so Yiqing Luo really couldn't grasp his temperament. If Zhu Wuxin found out that he had recognized the wrong person, it was very likely that he would kill her without hesitation. The Brothers of the World group would also suffer a calamity. She pursed her lips, feeling a little vexed. If she could be a little stronger, she wouldn't be afraid of Zhu Wuxin's power. This feeling was really depressing. She clenched her fists tightly as her mind raced, trying to think of a way to stall for time. As long as the World Group's brothers left Death God Castle, she had the confidence to escape from Death God Castle. As the saying goes, the ancients have said, "I am a girl who knows when to yield and when to stand tall." Her silence made Zhu Wu Xian even more irritated and impatient. He might as well walk towards Yiqing Luo, directly as his gaze was icy cold and malicious. Before little 9 was able to stop him, Zhu Wu Xian had already stretched out his hand towards Yiqing Luo's shoulder. "Follow me." Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she avoided his hand. Her body retreated by half a step, but she bumped into a thick meat wall. Chapter 540. This wall of flesh was extremely thick and warm, emitting a soothing sandalwood fragrance. That strong and powerful arm wrapped tightly around her waist. Yiqing Luo's heart gradually calmed down. "Ah Xian." Yiqing Luo's eyes sparkled with joy as she swiftly turned around and threw herself into the man's arms. He actually came. "It's Xiao Yi and the others, they're fine." Dmo Xian's large palm stroked Yiqing Luo's hair as his fingertips twirled a lock of hair, gently fiddling with it. "The Imperial Palace's disciples have already brought them back safely." The Imperial Palace? Yiqing Luo was stunned as she raised her head to look at that peerless face. After a while, she revealed a smile that could topple cities. Her arms encircled Dmo Xian's waist. Her face was plastered tightly against Dmo Xian's chest, listening to his heartbeat, smelling his scent. A sweet sense of satisfaction slowly flowed in his heart. The reason why Dmo Xian appeared here was not because Qiao Jin and the others had left Death God Castle in time and called for Dmo Xian. Instead, he was worried about her. Hence, after she and her brothers entered the Death God Castle, she gathered the Monarch Palace's disciples and waited outside. Dmo Xian let her do what she wanted to do, but unbeknownst to her, he had made preparations for the worst outcome. "You don't blame me?" Dmo Xian lowered his eyes to look at the little person in his arms as his lips curled into a faint arc. His eyes were filled with love. "Why would I blame you?" Yiqing Luo rubbed her face against his chest. "I know you're worried about me. There's always a chance." Just like now, Yiqing Luo had met Zhu Wu Xian. The World Group suffered a sneak attack from the Iron Blood Warriors. If Dmo Xian had not appeared, the situation today would be totally different. "I thought you don't want to rely on others." Dmo Xian's eyes were filled with tenderness as he hugged the woman in his arms tightly. Looking at her, Dmo Xian knew that she was not injured. Fortunately, she had protected herself well. He thought that Yiqing Luo would be angry, because this unique girl wouldn't rely on anyone. Yiqing Luo's eyes were filled with gentleness as her heart was fiercely touched. She raised her head and met his long and narrow peach blossom eyes. Her voice was gentle as she said word by word. But you're not someone else. Yes, she did not want to rely on others. Because in this world, the only reliable person was himself. However, Diemo was different. She was willing to hand over her back to Diemo and was willing to rely on Diemo. This man would be her future husband. She should learn to rely on him. What's more, this man's intentions were all for her. How could she bear to be angry and blame him? Good, very good, ha ha ha. Yiqing Luo, good job. Broken laughter came one after another. Zhu Wu Xian smiled as he slowly retreated. He pointed at Yiqing Luo and Diemo with an expression of a husband caught in the act, his eagle eyes filled with agony. You purposely pretended to forget about me and hooked up with another man, Yiqing Luo. To think that I've been thinking about you for so many years. The two's tender feelings were interrupted by this sharp laughter. When Diemo heard Zhu Wu Xian's accusations, he lowered his eyes towards Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo had a puzzled look as she shook her head. So many years. Many years. What kind of joke was he cracking? She wasn't even 15 years old yet. Before this, based on her reputation as a waste, it was impossible for her to know such an incredible figure like Zhu Wu Xian. Chapter 541. Zhu Wuxinyu. With Diemo by her side, Yiqing Luo naturally had no worries. Just as he was about to tell her that Zhu Wuxin had mistaken him for someone else, he saw the youth in the red robe's sleeves flutter in the wind. A powerful burst of profound energy burst out of his body. Streams of profound energy turned into countless sharp blades. In an instant, the entire space was filled with cold light, covering the sky and covering the earth. It shot towards Yiqing Luo and Diemo direction. Yiqing Luo's waist tightened as Diemo grabbed her and swiftly retreated. Soon after, he lifted his sleeves, and a powerful whirlwind instantly scattered those sharp blades. Boom, boom, boom. A deafening explosion sounded. Countless deep pits were blasted into the ground. Gravel flew in all directions, and smoke rose in spirals. Yiqing Luo was pulled behind Diemo as her charming eyes widened, looking at this scene in astonishment. Just how strong was her man? Diemo had never released his profound grade in front of her. She only knew that as the legend of Nirvana realm, Diemo, who was revered by everyone, was very strong. But to what extent she did not know. However, she knew that Zhu Wuxin was very strong. At the very least, if she were to fight with Zhu Wuxin, she would definitely not be able to gain any advantage. There was a high chance that he would be injured, whereas under Zhu Wu Xian's rage, he brought along a maniacal intent of destroying anything that he couldn't obtain. The profound qi that he released was actually suppressed back by Diemo with a casual wave of his sleeves. It was enough to show that Diemo profound grade was at least one level higher than Zhu Wu Xian. Zhu Wuxin also realized this point. He was forced to retreat a few steps by Diemo counterattack, and barely managed to stabilize his footsteps. He narrowed his eagle-like eyes, and there was a cold glint in them. If he were to go all out, he might not be Diemo opponent. But Zhu Wu Xian's vision fell onto Yiqing Luo. Those deep eyes that were sealed in ice for 3 feet stared deeply at her, as though he wanted to use that layer of frost to seal Yiqing Luo completely. After a while, Zhu Wuxin clenched his fists. Forget it. Anyway, he had already found Yiqing Luo, and he had waited for so many years. So a little while more wouldn't make a difference. One day, he would make Yiqing Luo admit personally that she remembered him. Yiqing Luo, you can forget about escaping from me. After saying this, the corners of Zhu Wuxin's mouth twitched coldly. With a leap, he disappeared from the secret room. That sentence was like an icy cold venomous snake, tightly coiling around Yiqing Luo. She couldn't help but shiver. Touching her own arm, she inched closer to Diemo arms. Her face turned slightly gloomy. He can't be serious, right? You and him. I've only seen him once. Yiqing Luo didn't hesitate to interrupt his words and immediately explained. Only when we were at the Heavenly Academy's freshman training grounds. He was on the second floor, and I was on the first floor. We just took a casual glance, and didn't even say a word. Dmo Xian lowered his head and gently caressed her face. I didn't suspect you. Yiqing Luo's gaze towards Zhu Wu Xian was very unfamiliar. Especially when she heard Zhu Wuxin's expression, as if she had caught her husband in the act. She was filled with helplessness and confusion. Dmo Xian naturally believed in Yiqing Luo's memory. If he had really met Zhu Wuxin, and had a deep relationship with him, he would definitely remember him. It's good that you believe me. I also don't know why he's so certain that I'm the person he's looking for. Moreover, Zhu Wu Xian had accurately called out her name. Her lower jaw was abruptly lifted up by Dmo Xian. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly. Her lower jaw was clasped by Zhu Wu Xian earlier, and it was still aching. Sensing Yiqing Luo's expression, Dmo Xian immediately released his hand. Chapter 542. I'm fine. Yiqing Luo closed his palm as her charming eyes were filled with smiles. Not painful. But I'm in pain. Dmo Xian's long arms suddenly exerted strength, as he held her delicate body tightly. The man's head was buried in the crook of her neck. His eyelashes were very long and dense. As he shook, it was like a feather brushing past her skin, causing her to shiver slightly. Lil Luo, do you know my heart will ache? The man's deep voice was like a mellow whine as it seeped into her ears. The smile on Yiqing Luo's lips slowly congealed by the side of her lips. The expression on her face started to loosen. His words intoxicated her heart. When had there ever been such a person who would feel heartache for her pain? When had there ever been such a person who treated her like a treasure? How fortunate was she to meet a person who loved her so much? Yiqing Luo blinked as her curly long eyelashes were stained with some moisture. Her hands cupped Dmo Xian's face, as she proactively offered her pink lips. That slightly moist eyelashes cast a circle of shadow on her eyelids. It accentuated that elegant and exquisite face, making one's heart flutter. Dmo Xian was stunned as he immediately regained his senses, as his large palm locked onto the back of Yiqing Luo's head as he deepened the kiss. Only this kiss had just ignited. That tightly shut door was suddenly pushed open as a loud and clear voice rang. Castle Lord, it's bad. Death God Castle has suffered a heavy blow. After the guard rushed into the secret room, he discovered. Where was his Castle Lord's shadow in the secret room? Who was this pair of lovers who couldn't bear to part from each other as they kissed? They even arranged a date to Death God Castle? Their guts were just too big. Before the guard could blow the whistle on his chest, his body suddenly felt light as he was sent flying. Dmo Xian's face was steely green, as his discontented eyes were dyed black as he stared coldly at that guard. That damn fellow. He actually dared to disturb him and Lil Luo's tenderness at such a crucial moment. He finally waited for Lil Luo, to take the initiative. At this moment, Dmo Xian even had the intention to kill that guard. Death God Castle was overwhelmed by the appearance of the Tharch Palace's disciples. Yen Xiaoyi and the rest took advantage of the chaos, and successfully left Death God Castle, with the help of the Imperial Palace disciples. This battle lasted for an entire 6 hours before it finally came to a stop. Whereas 6 hours later, Yiqing Luo and the others had already returned to the mansion. And in these 6 hours, the news regarding Death God Castle had already spread through the streets and alleys. It was said that Death God Castle suffered heavy casualties in this battle. However, the Emperor Palace's disciples didn't enter the Death God Castle to steal anything. After the fight, the Emperor Palace's disciples waved their sleeves and left. It was completely as though the Emperor Palace was purposely finding fault with the Death God Castle. Sitting in the main hall, Yiqing Luo couldn't help but laughed out loud when she heard the news that Xiao Jin had inquired about. Death God Castle was famous for its internal mechanisms and arrays. Those guards might have been considered experts in the past. However, 10 years ago, Saint Thief had fallen in Death God Castle. Hence, very few people would attempt to barge into Death God Castle. This kind of peaceful days had long steadied those guards' temperaments. Moreover, that day Zhu Wu Xian wasn't present in Death God Castle,
so the guards' morale was low. Naturally, they couldn't win against the brave Emperor Palace's disciples. But this battle went on for 6 hours. She assumed that Dmo Xian was jealous because of Zhu Wu Xian's matter? Otherwise, after she and the World Group's brothers left Death God Castle safely, the Emperor Palace should have retracted their troops. This man acted as though he didn't care at all in front of her. But in actual fact, she still felt disgusted. Chapter 543. Oh hey, now we're talking about proper business. Can you not put on that I'm very blissful expression? Xiao Jin sat on the chair by the side as he covered his eyes and cried out exaggeratedly, looking at Yi Qing Luo's smile. That was called 1,000 dainty and 100 enchanting, her eyes filled with tenderness. It was simply blinding, his titanium alloy dog eyes, all right. The few brothers beside him all laughed out secretly. Yi Qing Luo regained her senses, and on seeing her brother's mischievous smiles, her cheeks blushed red instantly. She then turned her head to look at Dmo Xian, who had already changed his appearance. That pair of peach blossom eyes were filled with smiles. Yi Qing Luo flew into a rage out of embarrassment as she bit her lips angrily and stared fiercely at him, immediately putting on a solemn expression. Let's talk about proper business. Let's talk about proper business. Everyone in the main hall immediately laughed out loudly. Xiao Jin was especially exaggerated as he stood up and laughed out loud. Usually he was used to seeing Yi Qing Luo's straightforward side, and occasionally seeing her revealing this coquettish look. Because of Dmo Xian, he couldn't bear it. Everyone laughed out loud while Long Yunzhan, who was sitting beside Xiao Jin, was still expressionless, as he stared coldly at Yu Qi Peng, who was sitting opposite him. This was the mansion where the World Group gathered. Because of this, Xiao Jin only allowed Yu Qi Peng's 2 trusted aides, and that Duke Jing to accompany Yu Qi Peng into the mansion. In the entire main hall, there were 60 over people. Only Yu Qi Peng, there were only 4 of them. Yu Qi Peng was filled with apprehension, as he was so nervous that his entire body's muscles were taut. The area where his right hand was severed was also twitching in pain because of the taut muscles. No matter how arrogant Duke Jing was usually, he wasn't an idiot. Now that he was in someone else's territory, and the surrounding people all looked not to be trifled with. Especially when he saw that Yi Qing Luo, who totally disregarded his identity at the Mercenary Association that day. He didn't say a single word. He had been listening to these youngsters talking about their own matters. When Duke Jing heard Yi Qing Luo laughing, his gaze subconsciously turned towards Yi Qing Luo. In his heart, this woman was totally not an ordinary woman. Which lady was as fierce as her? But at this glance, he saw Yi Qing Luo smiling like a flower. Her curved eyes were filled with happiness and sweetness. This smile was bright and radiant. It was like a flaming rose slowly blooming. In a split second, Duke Jing only felt that his heart was thumping nonstop. She was so beautiful. Uncle Monarch had bestowed him with many beauties, but none of those ladies in the residence could be compared to 1/10,000th of Yi Qing Luo. He recalled her domineering and awe-inspiring appearance that day at the Mercenary Guild. Suddenly, he felt that only such a woman was worthy of his distinguished status. Duke Jing. A stern voice rang in his ears. Duke Jing suddenly raised his head and saw a pair of icy cold eyes. His eyes were different from ordinary people. It was a pair of azure eyes that were as blue as the sea and sky, and they were suffused with a piercingly cold light. It was as if she could see through his soul from the bottom of his eyes. Duke Jing shuddered as he stood up. Here I am here. This interlude made everyone's gazes in the main hall gather onto Duke Jing. Duke Jing felt a chill down his spine as his head was filled with cold sweat. What's wrong? He spoke, his voice trembling. The World Group's group leader's gaze was simply too icy cold. As though he had seen through his thoughts towards Yi Qing Luo. Duke Jing hated this feeling. Chapter 544. Eldest young master Yuchi said that he would make a deal with the dark forces, and you're the one who introduced him. Yi Qing Luo casted a glance at him as she spoke out calmly. Dark forces? When Duke Jing heard that,
His expression instantly turned flustered as he subconsciously turned around and wanted to leave. The youngsters who were standing at the entrance all stood up one by one, forming a meat wall. These youngsters' faces were still slightly immature, but that imposing manner pressured Duke Jing so much that he retreated a few steps. "Tell me, how did you get in touch with the dark forces? Why did you make me make a deal with the dark forces?" Yu Qipeng saw the atmosphere turning stiff as he bore with the intense pain in his wrist as he turned his head and stared at Duke Jing. The reason why he ended up with an ending where his right hand was chopped off was all because of Duke Jing. If it wasn't for Duke Jing who pulled him along to make some soul deal with the dark forces, he wouldn't have been swallowed so badly. If it wasn't for the fact that he met Yiqing Luo by now, he would have turned into a dried corpse which had been swallowed by the dark forces. Because of this, when Yiqing Luo and Xiao Jin interrogated him about the dark forces, he didn't hesitate to say out Duke Jing's name. Yiqing Luo saved Yu Qipeng and brought the Iron Blood warriors out from Death God Castle. The motive was to find out the news about the dark forces from his mouth. She wondered if it was her misperception. Somehow she felt that the dark forces' target seemed to be her. Around her, there were more and more people who made deals with the dark forces. "Yu Qipeng, you promised this duke that you will not betray me." Duke Jing's face was steely green as he returned to his own seat under the coercion of the bunch of youngsters. Yu Qipeng gave a cold harumph. "You also swore that it's just a deal, and that it wouldn't affect my life. Do you know that I was almost swallowed by this strange energy today?" "No, impossible." Duke Jing's eyes widened. "That's something which can borrow your energy. How could it be swallowed?" His words paused as he lowered his head to look at Yu Qipeng's bandaged-up hand, which was obviously chopped off. His body started to tremble uncontrollably. No wonder. Those cultivators who came back alive from Death God Castle carried him on their shoulders, all the way to this huge mansion. On the way, he also heard about the matter of Yu Qipeng's hand being chopped off. Those profound practitioners spoke very vaguely. Duke Jing roughly understood that it was Yu Qipeng's huge axe, which was attached by the black qi, and almost swallowed Yu Qipeng, whereas Yiqing Luo used her fan to chop off Yu Qipeng's hand before she managed to escape from that huge axe's devouring. Then Duke Jing, how did you get in touch with the dark forces, and how did you make the deal with them? Looking at Duke Jing's expression, Yiqing Luo knew that he understood what had happened as her lips curled into a smile which didn't look like a smile. This smile was different from the radiant smile just now. Duke Jing's entire body turned icy cold, as he felt goosebumps all over as his heart was filled with fear. When he raised his eyes to look at Yiqing Luo, her half-squinted eyes reflected a sharp glint, as though it had pierced into his chest. Duke Jing's but fell onto the chair. This king also doesn't know. Yiqing Luo raised her brows as her smile gradually turned cold. This king really doesn't know. This king has never made a deal with the dark forces before. Duke Jing hugged his head as he shook his head furiously. This king only heard that the dark forces' energy can raise one's power. As long as you give enough souls, the dark forces will help you to fulfill all your wishes. Chapter 545. As the old general's son, Duke Jing was later brought back to the palace by the monarch and was pampered endlessly. Although under the doting of the monarch, this general's son had become completely useless. But the bloodline of a general was still the bloodline of a general. Duke Jing assumed that since he was the general's son, he should have the same lofty sentiments as his father. Especially after hearing the evaluation of him from the people outside the palace, when he was visiting women. Duke Jing wanted to make a name for himself even more, to prove that he wasn't a mediocre person, to fiercely slap those people's faces. It was also at this time that he met Yu Qipeng. After getting to know Yu Qipeng, he was infected by Yu Qipeng's lofty sentiments and persistence towards his dreams. He wholeheartedly treated Yu Qipeng as his own brother. Yu Qipeng also chatted happily with him. He thought that Yu Qipeng was talented, brave and intelligent. Even if he did not have the title of prince, he would still be able to become an overlord. The two of them hit it off immediately. He wanted to form a mercenary group together. Yu Qipeng was the leader and was in charge of everything on the surface, whereas Duke Jing was in charge of the mercenary group's internal affairs, which was to be a money tree. Seeing the Iron Blood warriors getting stronger and stronger, Duke Jing seemed to be able to see himself standing at the highest level of the mercenary group, with a wave of his arm and tens of thousands of people responding to him. The hot blood in his heart was ignited by Yu Qipeng. He kept urging Yu Qipeng to establish a mercenary guild. But Yu Qipeng always used the reason that the current strength of the mercenary group was not strong enough, and they were unable to upgrade the mercenary group in the shortest time possible to reject him. He watched as the predators grew stronger and stronger. There were already 5,000 of them, and they had taken over the market that the mercenary union had to pass through, becoming the local tyrant. Duke Jing was delighted with himself. Just as Duke Jing was anxious to establish a mercenary group to flaunt his ability to Uncle Monarch, Yu Qipeng finally nodded his head and agreed to head to the Mercenary Association to register the mercenary group. However, Yu Qipeng made a request. Yu Qipeng hoped to use Duke Jing's name to gather some earth profound and above cultivators with extremely fast speed, and to recruit a large number of thieves. He said it was for the development of the mercenary group. Duke Jing had always listened to whatever Yu Qipeng said. When he heard that it was for the sake of the mercenary group, he didn't think too much about it. Without saying a word to Uncle June, he set up a table at the entrance of the mansion and gathered the thieves and cultivators. It was at this moment that the dark forces came looking for them. It was a man wearing a black cloak from head to toe. The figure was stooped, and the voice was hoarse and ear-piercing. It was impossible to tell the gender of the black-cloaked man. The black-cloaked man directly invited Duke Jing, wanting to discuss a deal with him. The black-cloaked man told him that the reason why Yu Qipeng was looking for bandits was to enter Death God Castle and complete a mercenary group mission. If he was willing to use his soul as a trade, the black-cloaked man would give them enough power to complete the task and raise their profound rank. Yu Qipeng immediately nodded in agreement. He had always been bold and arrogant, thinking that with Uncle June around, the entire West Continent would have to give him face. Naturally, he didn't think that someone would lie to him. He was willing to use his soul as a trade to increase his strength and complete the mercenary group's first mission. Unexpectedly, the black-cloaked man rejected the deal on the grounds that his soul was too weak. Hence, Duke Jing brought Yu Qipeng over. As the eldest young master of an aristocratic family, Yu Qipeng had been nurtured as the future patriarch of the Yuqi family since he was young, so his soul power wasn't low. The strong all thirsted for power. Chapter 546. What? When Yu Qipeng heard that, he stood up in shock. As he was overly agitated, the chair beside his legs was overturned onto the ground. A deathly aura appeared on his pale face. After some time, he suddenly laughed out loudly. He laughed until his entire body was twitching as he stared at Duke Jing's eyes. But it was filled with sorrow and emptiness. Yi Qing Luo frowned slightly, but didn't interrupt Yu Qipeng's crazy laughter. Until Yu Qipeng couldn't catch his breath from laughing so hard as he couldn't stop coughing. He coughed as his legs were unstable as he fell onto the ground. He didn't get up as he just laid on the ground with his four limbs spread out. Yi Qing Luo poured a cup of tea as she slowly got up and walked to his side, passing the water to him. Yu Qipeng, who was lying on the ground, didn't bother about the cup in front of him. His gaze was still empty as his lips curled into a smile. Do you know, the one who told me that the Mercenary Association would issue this high-grade rare mission that day was someone from the Dark Forces. When he said that, the entire hall fell into a dead silence. The cup in Yi Qing Luo's hand shook as she frowned and speedily placed the cup aside as she grabbed Yu Qipeng's collar. What did you say? Black-cloaked man, stooped figure, ear-piercing voice, unable to differentiate gender. Word by word, he repeated what Duke Jing had said earlier. Following that, his pale lips trembled. It's this black-cloaked man who told me that the Mercenary Association would issue a mission to head to Death God Castle to steal the exquisite pagoda, and Duke Jing would help me to complete the mission safely. Didn't Duke Jing bring you to do a deal with the dark forces? Haven't you seen the black-cloaked man? Yi Qing Luo's brows creased suspiciously. Earlier Yu Qi Peng's performance was that he totally didn't know what the dark forces were. Moreover, Yu Qi Peng was the future patriarch of the Yu Qi family. If he had seen the black-cloaked man and told him about this mission, why would he sign a sole deal with the black-cloaked man through Duke Jing? Based on Yu Qi Peng's intelligence, he naturally knew that something was amiss. No. Yu Qi Peng's left hand's fingers clenched tightly into a fist. The smile on his face slowly turned into pain. The thirst for power had blinded his eyes. It was also because he was too confident, believing in his own ability, and also believing that under his influence, Duke Jing wouldn't have the guts to lie to him. He had never seen the so-called Dark Force emissary. Everything was done through Duke Jing. Everyone fell silent. Yu Qi Peng was directly brought over from Death God Castle. After that, he asked the Iron Blood warriors to bring Duke Jing to exchange for Yu Qi Peng. The two of them had no chance to collude in advance. After all, Yu Qi Peng had always believed in the Dark Force's energy, and had always believed that as long as the Dark Force's energy was attached to him, not to mention one Yi Qing Luo, even if 10 of them came, he wasn't afraid at all. Furthermore, Yu Qi Peng's appearance did not seem to be faking it. When the words of these two people were combined, it was a huge conspiracy. Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes as she stared at Yu Qi Peng, whose face was ashen as she raised her voice. Jin Zi, arrange a few brothers to send eldest young Master Yu Qi and Duke Jing back to the Iron Blood warriors first. After Yu Qi Peng and Duke Jing were sent away, Long Yunzhan's dull azure blue eyes looked towards Yi Qing Luo. This dark force's motive is directed at you? Yi Qing Luo returned to her own seat and sat down as she nodded her head with a grave expression. I also have this feeling. Linking Yu Qi Peng and Duke Jing's words together, it was obvious that there was a pair of invisible hands behind the scenes, pushing the development of the plan. Chapter 547. Then, the person who issued the exquisite pagoda's mission, could it be? Xiao Jin suddenly stood up as his index finger trembled. I've thought of many ways to investigate this person, but to no avail. There's a possibility of this. Yi Qing Luo nodded. If Yu Qi Peng and Duke Jing were just a chess piece in the Dark Force's hands, then the so-called exquisite pagoda could possibly be a chess piece of the Dark Forces. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Just when she was leading her group to register for the mercenary group, she coincidentally met the Iron Blood warriors. Wait. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased as her expression turned slightly grave. How did the Dark Forces know that I want to establish a mercenary group? The minute this question was raised, the entire hall's atmosphere turned solemn. 60 over youngsters looked at each other in dismay as they realized the seriousness of the problem. Their whereabouts. They were being monitored by the so-called Dark Forces? If this was really the case, that would be too terrifying. The youngsters had goosebumps all over as they couldn't help but rub their arms. Not exactly. Dmo Xian's brows rose as his ordinary-looking face made that pair of peach blossom eyes look even shinier. The Dark Forces can appear beside you without any trace, so naturally they have their own forces in the academy. Yi Qing Luo nodded her head in enlightenment. Her eyes suddenly shone as though she thought of something. Dark Forces. That day, she was on the second floor of the library pavilion when she eavesdropped on the conversation between the director and the so-called guardian. Recalling the guardian mentioning about the freshman, and the director mentioned that he kept a tight watch on the freshman. Could it be that the lord mentioned by the guardian, that guardian, was someone from the Dark Forces? This thought shocked Yi Qing Luo so much that her expression turned extremely grave. If the director listened to the Dark Forces, then Heavenly Academy would be in trouble. Seeing Yi Qing Luo's expression changing, Dmo Xian leaned over and caressed her forehead, which was oozing with cold sweat. What did you think of? No, nothing. Yi Qing Luo brushed his hand away as her back felt a chill. She slowly shook her head. These were only her guesses, and there was no evidence to prove it. There might be a problem with the director, but he had after all been the director of Heavenly Academy for over 10 years. Furthermore, from the short interaction with the director, he had a huge ambition. And he liked the feeling of standing on a high position, overlooking others. Without the Heavenly Academy, he was nothing. No matter what, he wouldn't do anything detrimental to the Academy. Thinking in this way, Yiqing Luo threw this thought to the back of her head. What you mean is, if the dark force's target is me, the other party will definitely guess that I won't stay in the Yi family during the holidays. The Yi family had Yi Qingjian. Yi Qingqian had already made a deal with the dark forces. She had once mentioned in the Yi family that during the 3 days of holidays, she would be going out to play with the devil class students. Presumably, Yi Qingqian would inform the dark forces of this news. The dark forces made use of Yu Qipeng's Iron Blood Warriors, just to let Yiqing Luo's group go against the Iron Blood Warriors. Then, did the dark forces know that the world group were students from the devil class? What was the purpose of the underground forces doing this? Countless doubts were surging in his mind. A large palm covered her head. Dmo Xian had unknowingly stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other hand caressing her hair. The warm and thick palm, the soothing sandalwood scent enveloped Yiqing Luo. Chapter 548. Control her? Yiqing Luo's brows creased into a bundle as she turned her head to look at Dmo Xian behind her. Why? The motive is still unclear, but from this series of events, the dark force's motive is definitely to control you. Dmo Xian analyzed. Since the ability assessment, that woman holding the profound Yin sword, and later on Yi Qingqian, they had all made a deal with the dark forces and wanted to provoke your anger, so that the dark force's profound Yin Qi would be transferred to you. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she thought carefully. It seemed that it was indeed so. If it was said that Yi Qingling and Yi Qingqian had no choice but to make a deal with the dark forces in order to gain a foothold in the Yi family, it could also be said that the dark force's scope was too wide, and she had seen 2 of them around her. Then now, Yu Qipeng and Duke Jing, both of them, were completely certain that the dark forces had spread around Yiqing Luo's surroundings. Their target was definitely her. But what was the motive of controlling her? Do you still remember your profound jade heart? Dmo Xian's words reminded Yiqing Luo. She stood up abruptly as she turned around and looked at the calm Dmo Xian. You mean? It's not impossible. Dmo Xian's large palm gently caressed her face, as a complicated emotion flashed past his peach blossom eyes. But Yiqing Luo's thoughts were placed on what Dmo Xian said, and didn't notice the change in his expression. That's right. Her profound jade heart. Her profound jade heart was dug out. This body of hers obviously possessed an extremely strong and enviable top-grade profound jade heart, and by right it should be the best body to cultivate the profound grade. For someone who possessed this kind of profound jade heart, 1 day of cultivation was equivalent to 10 years of ordinary people. However, she couldn't cultivate, and had no way to control the profound jade heart to cultivate the profound grade. In Old Man Song's words, her body and her meridians were all sealed by an extremely strong force. She had never thought about who the person who sealed her was. Ever since she was born, because she was appraised as a top-grade profound jade heart, it could be said that in the entire Three Springs city, or even in the West Continent, she was hailed as a heaven's pride. And it was because of this beautiful reputation. As a result, when she was tested for profound qi, she was determined to be a trash meridian with no cultivation foundation, and her reputation became even worse. When she was tested for profound qi, she was only 3 months old. This was because when a profound practitioner was born, their body would be surrounded by a faint profound energy that would connect with the profound jade heart. Before she was 3 months old, the only people Yiqing Luo had contact with were her mother and Yi Tianquang. Yi Tianquang was absolutely unwilling to seal her meridians. After all, to Yi Tianquang, there was no one more important than the status of the Three Springs sect. If Yiqing Luo was a cultivation genius, he couldn't wait to announce it to the world. Then the only possibility was his mother. Did Nyangqin seal her veins after she was born? Why, Towards her mother, Yiqing Luo didn't have many memories. Her mother died when she was 5 years old. A child's memory was not perfect. She only remembered that her mother was a very gentle and virtuous woman. Mother took care of her husband and taught her children, neither jealous nor jealous. She was also wholeheartedly devoted to Yi Tianquang. Yiqing Luo had never seen her mother use the profound grade. But her mother's identity was absolutely not simple. With Yi Tianquang's ambition, it was impossible for him to marry a woman without any status as his official wife. So much so that even after her mother passed away 10 years ago, she still retained her position as the official wife, and retained Yiqing Luo's identity as the D-daughter. Chapter 549. Most importantly, the 2 letters that his mother had left behind. The map in the 2 letters, as well as the letter left behind by his mother, all indicated that the map was extraordinary. How could his mother be an ordinary person? Although Yiqing Luo didn't have a deep memory of her mother, but Yiqing Luo knew that her mother really doted on her. It was very likely that her mother sealed her meridians to protect her. Yiqing Luo's hand slowly covered her own heart, and she could faintly see that piece of jade-shaped crystal in her body. This place had once nurtured that top-grade profound heart jade. The goal of the dark forces was very likely to be that profound jade heart. Yiqing Luo suddenly had a feeling of understanding. The goal of the dark forces is this body of mine that nurtures the profound jade heart. In other words, her profound heart jade was very likely dug out by people from the dark forces? Thinking of this, Yiqing Luo's eyes suddenly turned cold. Dark forces? Very well, she would remember this. Since the dark forces wanted to play with her, she would play with them till the end. Yiqing Luo's things, since she had just snatched it, then she had to be prepared to return it 100-fold. Trying to set her up? He had underestimated her. Qing Luo, that castle lord of Death God Castle. Xiao Jin suddenly thought of something. When Yiqing Luo mentioned Death God Castle's castle lord, her expression turned grave, as though she had seen a dreadful beast. Dizun came just in time today. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to sit here so peacefully. But Yiqing Luo and Death God Castle's castle lord had met. That was to say, Death God Castle's castle lord knew that Yiqing Luo had barged into Death God Castle and brought away the exquisite pagoda. Wouldn't Death God Castle's castle lord remember Yiqing Luo? Zhu Wuxin mentioning that person, Yiqing Luo frowned as she sighed helplessly. That lunatic, he shouldn't. I'm here. Don't be afraid. Dmo Xian directly interrupted Yiqing Luo's words as he hugged her waist and lightly kissed her forehead. Everyone. Holy shit. Caught off guard, he was fed a face full of dog food. How could he live? After resting for a moment, Yiqing Luo saw the 6 youngsters sitting on the ground in the courtyard. The surrounding youths looked at them enviously. Long Yunzhan led the remaining brothers and divided them into 3 teams. The first team accepted some low-level quests. One team would take on an intermediate quest or a low-level rare quest. The first team was personally led by Long Yunzhan to take on high-level missions. The process of this mission was surprising, thrilling, and exciting for these youths. It was completely different from the training and combat training they had in the academy. In the process of doing the mission, it was very likely that they would encounter all kinds of accidents, and they needed to deal with them according to the situation. Because of that, even though this mission wasn't long, it was still a great improvement for them. At this time, the 6 youths sitting in the courtyard were originally stuck at the mystic level, unable to advance. After this mission, they were promoted and immediately broke through the barrier of advancement. Especially when he followed Yiqing Luo into Death God Castle. That young man who almost fell into the swamp illusion was the most eye-catching. The space around the young man seemed to be burning. Balls of spiritual energy revolved around him unceasingly. Yiqing Luo's heart warmed up as she saw a black halo circling beneath the young man's feet, with 6 star patterns constantly lingering. Immediately following that, 2 more star patterns appeared indistinctly. Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed past a sliver of astonishment. He's actually going to advance by 2 grades. 2 grades. Chapter 550. The profound rank above the profound rank was as difficult as ascending to the heavens, even if it was just one rank. Among the youths, there wasn't a single person who could rise 2 ranks in one go. Looking at the young man who was sitting on the ground with spiritual energy circulating around him, the other youths revealed looks of envy. The other youngsters who followed Yi Qing Luo into Death God Castle naturally understood the reason for this youngster's advancement. However, he didn't expect that he would be able to rise by 2 ranks in a row. If they had known earlier, they would have also tried falling into the swamp. Who knows, they might have been able to level up. As the youth absorbed it, a burst of profound energy erupted. His body emitted an intense light that was dazzling. A powerful profound energy rose from the youth's feet like a whirlpool. As soon as he opened his eyes, a sharp light burst forth from the youth's eyes. He stood up and clenched his fists. After feeling his strength, a joyful smile immediately appeared on his face. Congratulations. A cold voice sounded beside his ear. The young man turned his head and saw Yi Qing Luo, who was standing behind him. As usual, her black outfit accentuated her slender figure. His long black hair was tied up high and fixed at the back of his head, making him look valiant. However, the long and narrow expression on her face made her look even more charming. The youth's heart trembled. He cupped his hands and knelt on one knee. Thank you for your guidance, Vice Commander. When he was in Death God Castle, he showed signs of advancing. At that time, if he had directly advanced, he would only have advanced a single grade. They would also be discovered by the guards of Death God Castle, causing the mission to fail. However, Yi Qing Luo taught him how to guide his profound qi to store in his profound heart jade, and how to correctly combine profound qi with his profound heart jade. The profound energy that had always been stored within the profound jade heart had been under a high degree of tension for a long period of time. The change in his state of mind caused the fluctuations of his profound energy to become more and more intense. That was how he was able to advance 2 ranks. Everything was all thanks to Yi Qing Luo. Those who are grateful are pure in heart. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled as she helped him up and looked into his eyes. What's your name? Baiming Liancheng. The youth's sonorous voice answered her question. North Sea. Yi Qing Luo raised her brows in surprise. This surname was really rare. Generally speaking, compound surnames belong to large families. North Sea. This family name seemed to belong to a large aristocratic family from another continent. Everyone has already advanced, right? Now, we need to set off to the Mercenary Association to hand in the mission. Xiao Jin's excited voice sounded from the inner courtyard. Then, he walked out with a face full of smiles, and Yin Xiaoyi followed behind him. Yi Qing Luo nodded her head. Today, several teams had completed their tasks at hand. After completing the quest, it was best to hand it in as soon as possible, in case of any accidents. Among the training missions, the contents of the missions overlapped quite a bit. For example, for a low-level training mission, Mission A would require a certain medicinal herb from a certain place, while Mission B would also require a certain medicinal herb from a certain place. Because of this, mercenary groups would often fight over the items they needed for their missions. Yin Xiaoyi had already calculated, other than Yi Qing Luo's high-grade rare mission, the other 3 small teams had completed 7 low-grade missions, 3 intermediate-grade missions, and 1 high-grade mission. In total, there should be about 20 to 30 points of mercenary group honor points. Coupled with the high-grade rare mission reward in Yi Qing Luo's hands, they could directly upgrade to a bronze plate mercenary group. Chapter 551. Immediately, Yi Qing Luo, Long Yunzhan, and the others headed towards the Mercenary Association to submit their mission. Today the youngsters were all exhausted after a long day, so Yi Qing Luo asked them to have a good rest, as there was an even more important training waiting for them tomorrow. And in their group, there were only Long Yunzhan, Mo Hanshang and 5 others. With Dmo Xian accompanying them, they didn't have to worry about other mercenary groups snatching the mission's required items. The youths were indeed tired, and did not reject this arrangement. Now that there were 6 of them, Yiqing Luo summoned Shiju for Long Yunjian, and the other 3 to ride on. What made everyone feel strange was that when Shiju saw Long Yunjian, it actually produced a feeling of dread. Everyone was puzzled, but Yiqing Luo and Long Yunjian understood, because Long Yunjian's true form was that of a human dragon. Dragons were the noblest of all beasts. This was especially true for the human dragon, whose status was even higher than that of the dragon clan. When magical beasts encounter the dragon clan, they will naturally feel a reflexive fear. Yiqing Luo pacified Shiju for some time before Shiju became their mount. Although he knew that this human dragon was his master's friend, this innate fear couldn't be dispelled no matter what. Lil Luo, or come up. Dmo Xian called out Little Nine, as he stretched out his hand towards Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo rubbed Shiju's head, and returned to Dmo Xian's side. Riding on phantom beasts and holy beasts was naturally much faster than moving as a team. In less than the time it took to burn a stick of incense, they had already passed the marketplace, and were heading straight for the mercenary union. When they passed by the marketplace, Yiqing Luo's nose acutely smelled something as her expression congealed. Wait a minute. The 2 battle pets stopped. Can you smell it? Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she raised her hand to cover her nose. The others naturally smelled it. A light breeze blew, bringing with it the smell of blood. The smell of blood was extremely strong. It was a marketplace. Yiqing Luo and the others exchanged glances as they all leapt down from the war beast's back, landing onto the ground. In front of him was the side door of the marketplace. The thick smell of blood was extremely pungent. Something had happened at the marketplace. They rushed through the side door and saw. This was an extremely bloody scene. The entire marketplace was littered with corpses. The stall owners who had set up their stalls yesterday were now lying on the ground. The pungent stench was unbearable. Even his eyes seemed to be covered in a layer of blood red. What caused their faces to darken even more was the dense flock of birds and beasts. Their sharp claws and beaks were constantly fiddling with the corpses. From time to time, an ear-piercing whistle would come out of its mouth. Upon detecting the intrusion of a living person's presence, those bird beasts who were munching on the corpses all raised their long necks, looking towards Yiqing Luo and the others. These bird beasts were huge, about the size of a stone lion. His eyes were as red as fire, as if blood had filled his pupils. Drops of blood dripped down from the sharp mouth. It's the dark forces. Dmo Xian frowned slightly as his eyes were tainted with a trace of coldness. When everyone heard this, they suddenly understood something. Yuqi Peng's wrist was chopped off because of the dark force's profound yin qi. He was the future patriarch of the Yuqi family. Severing his right hand was equivalent to severing half of the Yuqi family's empire. In order to nurture Yuqi Peng, how much time, manpower and resources had the Yuqi family spent? But in the end, it turned out to be like this. Chapter 552. How would the Yuqi family take this lying down? The source of all these was the dark forces. Towards this powerhouse, most of them had only heard of it, but had never seen it before. But after Yuqi Peng's incident, it would definitely attract the attention of the other large families. If the dark forces wanted to use their strength as bait to sign the soul contract with the cultivators, then the number of people who fell for it would absolutely not be as many as now. Yesterday they went to the marketplace and came into contact with the Iron Blood warriors and these stall owners. So the dark forces people massacred the marketplace. They wanted to shift all the blame onto Yiqing Luo's team, massacring everyone who had come into contact with them. Even if the Yuqi family came to investigate, the dark forces had nothing to fear. Dark forces? Who could testify? It was just Yuqi Peng casually saying it. Moreover, Yuqi Peng's hand was obviously chopped off by Yiqing Luo. Perhaps she had some conflict with Yuqi Peng and found an excuse to cheat him? Furthermore, the most important thing was, it was uncertain if Yuqi Peng and Duke Jing were still alive or not. Dark forces are indeed sinister. Their methods are just too despicable. Xiao Jin looked at the blood flowing into a river, as he clenched his fists tightly. Yin Xiaoyi was so angry that her petite body was trembling as one hand clutched Xiao Jin's sleeve tightly. In her vision, it was a patch of red. Although their own abilities weren't bad, they had also used inhuman methods to deal with others. But they had never seen such a cruel scene. These people, these stall owners, were still talking to them yesterday, and even chatting with them. Today they had turned into corpses. How could their hearts take it? Yi Qing Luo pursed her lips as she looked at those huge bird beasts, gritting her teeth silently. Search around. See if there are any survivors. Xiao Jin and Dmo Xian then reacted as they immediately gripped their weapons tightly, as they dashed into the pool of blood. Yi Qing Luo and Dmo Xian exchanged glances as they walked towards those bird beasts. The bird beasts gave out sharp cries, and following that, all of them flapped their wings as they flew towards Yi Qing Luo and the other's direction in unison. Their wings were huge, and every time they flapped, it would set off a strong airflow. It opened its mouth, revealing its razor-sharp teeth. Their blood-red eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty aura. They screamed as if they had seen their prey, and were extremely excited. Yi Qing Luo's expression was gloomy and cold as her feather fan stirred up a whirlwind, shooting out several strands of silver silk, directly towards the bird beasts in front. Dmo Xian stood by the side and didn't make a move, but followed closely behind Yi Qing Luo. It was within the range that could protect her, but it wouldn't affect Yi Qing Luo's performance. He would not obstruct Yi Qing Luo's growth. He also believed in Yi Qing Luo's ability. Towards this level of bird beast, Yi Qing Luo was more than enough. Moreover, this was also an opportunity for actual combat training. Occasionally, some fearless birds and beasts would attack him. Dmo Xian's long and narrow eyelids flickered slightly, and a sharp glint flashed past his eyes. The bird beast was actually torn into two halves. These birds were at least high-level magical beasts and had their own consciousness. After realizing that Dmo Xian wasn't someone to be trifled with, he didn't dare to attack him anymore. Instead, they opened their mouths and bit the other 5 people one by one. Yi Qing Luo's fingers held onto the feather fan as her footwork was strange and fast, wandering among those bird beasts. The feather fan in her hands could be used as a long-distance attack weapon, as well as close combat. The speed of killing these bird beasts was both fast and accurate. Chapter 553. Xiao Jin and the others were filled with rage because of these people's violent deaths, and towards these bird beasts, they totally didn't show any mercy. Their killing was called ruthless and merciless. In a split second, the entire marketplace's ground was covered with the blood of those huge bird beasts. The birds and beasts let out shrill screams, and the hundreds of birds and beasts were instantly reduced to only 20. These bird beasts' blood-colored eyes turned even more sinister and bloodthirsty. Flapping their huge wings, they swept up layers of wind and waves as they flew up into the sky. They raised their long necks as their mouths kept giving out that series of cries. They're summoning their companions. Yi Qing Luo's expression was cold. These bird beasts were all in the intermediate and advanced grades, and had their own consciousness. Beasts were extremely sensitive towards danger. Just like when they saw Dmo Xian, they knew that this person was dangerous, so they didn't dare to attack him. After they realized that Yi Qing Luo and the others were in danger, they should have left in groups. But unfortunately, these bird beasts actually summoned their own companions, in a vain attempt to continue contending against them. Was this because of the bird beasts' pride, or, before they completed their mission, they didn't dare to leave easily? Just a moment later, the marketplace's sky turned pitch black. Densely packed bird beasts were hovering in the sky. The fishy stench from their flapping wings merged with the entire marketplace's blood stench, making one feel nauseous. Looks like these bird beasts are going to massacre the entire marketplace before they leave. Xiao Jin stared at the bird beasts in the sky, as he clenched the gold coin darts in his hands tightly. The densely packed bird beasts, as compared to what they saw previously, had doubled in number. Previously the bird beasts were all on land, fighting with them. But now, these bird beasts were hovering in the sky, and didn't charge down to make a move on them. But that series of sharp cries seemed to be urging them, which really made them terrified. Xiao Yi, you and Shiju search around to see if there's anyone alive. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as a cold glint flashed past. These bird beasts were actually so intelligent. They knew how to make use of their numbers and cries to break the opponent's mentality. In their hearts, after the fear towards them was born, then they would break them one by one. This kind of intelligence. It didn't seem like a bird beast at all. Yiqing Luo kept the deep thoughts in her eyes as her eyes flashed. Pay attention, these bird beasts might suddenly attack. Shiju and Yin Xiaoyi carefully walked towards the pile of corpses. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a cold smile. Kill. Were these birds trying to play psychological warfare with her? That would depend on whether she would allow it or not. Yiqing Luo's entire body emitted a gush of cold glint as she opened her feather fan, and with a leap, numerous silver threads shot out into midair. Little Nine's body flashed, and was already lying below Yiqing Luo. By the time Yiqing Luo was seated properly, its four limbs moved, and it dashed towards the densely packed flock of birds and beasts. Each of the silver threads was sharp. Another stream of mystical energy flowed, and as it swept towards the herd of beasts, the coarse birds and beasts were sliced into two halves. The rest of the people on the ground also moved quickly. Using the surrounding walls as a springboard, he leaped into the air. Every time it jumped, it could kill several birds and beasts. The cries of the birds and beasts became even more shrill and shrill. Fresh blood, the stench of blood, splashed onto Yiqing Luo's face and her clothes. It added a bloodthirsty flirtatious charm to that gorgeous face of hers. Chapter 554. The feather fan in Yiqing Luo's hands waved even faster, as her footwork gradually increased. She continued to kill the bird beasts in front of her, as she guided her profound jade heart's profound qi towards the direction which she controlled. That wave after wave of profound qi surged out from her body. Emo Hanshang stood on the wall as his action of killing the bird beasts halted. Growing up in the mercenary association since young, he had seen too many people. Emo Hanshang had developed an ability to recognize people. From the first time he met Yiqing Luo, he knew that this beautiful lady who didn't seem to have any profound qi, like an ordinary person, was absolutely not as simple as she looked on the surface. Her body carried a gust of righteous qi, and she had the craftiness and quick-wittedness of a devil from hell. This kind of complicated temperament, on Yiqing Luo's body, was so harmonious. In Death God Castle, he saw Yiqing Luo's quick-wittedness and ability, but at this moment, seeing Yiqing Luo's moves, he was completely subdued by her. It was a strange ghost-like footwork, clean and efficient actions. When he saw fresh blood, a flash of excitement and bloodthirst flashed past her eyes. This kind of her, as compared to the usual her, was very different. But this kind of her was so mesmerizing, making one fall for her. Hanshang. A chilly tender rebuke was heard, and immediately a red ray shot towards him. That was Yiqing Luo's glower flame fan. That fan spun at an extremely fast speed, directly brushing past Emo Hanshang's cheek. He heard a miserable shriek behind him, and immediately felt a stench of blood coming from his back. That feather fan split that bird beast which was sneaking an attack on Emo Hanshang into two halves, and immediately it returned to Yiqing Luo's hand. Hanshang, this is a chance for you to learn from experience. Yiqing Luo's gaze was calm as she looked at him. Only through continuous battles, to absorb experience from battles, will you be able to comprehend. Emo Hanshang was stunned as he clenched the long sword in his hand tightly. In battle, the most taboo is to be absent-minded. If there's a next time, I will not lend a helping hand. After Yiqing Luo finished this sentence, she dashed into the crowd of bird beasts once again. This wasn't a good habit. Yiqing Luo must prevent Emo Hanshang from being absent-minded. If he lost focus in battle, he would be handing his life over to the enemy. When Emo Han Shang heard that, his entire body stiffened as a sliver of resolution surfaced on his handsome face. He didn't care if Yiqing Luo could see it or not as he nodded his head hard towards her direction. Following that, he clenched the long sword in his hand tightly as he dashed into the crowd of bird beasts once again. The four of them were fighting at the front line while Dmo Xian stood amidst the corpses strewn all over the ground. His gaze was fixated on Yiqing Luo without blinking. He watched as she dealt with the birds and beasts cleanly and swiftly. Her figure as she moved between the birds and beasts was so graceful and agile. His eyes were gradually filled with smiles. Suddenly, from the other end of the marketplace, Yin Xiaoyi's voice was heard. "Found it. There are living people here." That was the tea house where Yiqing Luo led the World Group's youngsters to drink tea that day. The owner of the tea house was hiding in the pile of straw behind the kitchen. He was only crushed by the collapsed house, but he was still alive. When Yiqing Luo heard that, she squinted her eyes as she looked at Yin Xiaoyi. She and Shiju were dragging a man who was covered in blood, carrying him out of the collapsed tea house. Yiqing Luo let little Nine settle the bird beasts in front of her. With a leap, she speedily walked over to that side. The tea house's owner was trembling all over, and on seeing Yiqing Luo and the others, his eyes flashed past a glint of radiance. Yiqing Luo half squatted down as she grabbed the tea house's owner's hand, checking on his extremely weak pulse. Chapter 555. If Yin Xiaoyi was a little later, the tea house boss would probably have to swallow his anger. Yiqing Luo took out some pills from the profound phoenix ring and fed it to the tea house boss. Following that, she helped him bandage his wounds. Seeing the pain on the tea house boss's face gradually subsiding and his complexion getting better, she opened her mouth to ask, "What's going on?" The tea house boss's bloodied hand grabbed Yiqing Luo's arm tightly. "I don't know. These bird beasts suddenly rushed in and ate all the people in the marketplace." That scene was extremely bloody and cruel. The tea house boss was holding some firewood in the kitchen when he saw that scene. Those bird beasts directly descended from the sky, like an arrow leaving the bow. Their sharp claws grabbed onto a person's shoulder and tore that person into two halves. As the house collapsed, he hid in the grass and saw everything around him clearly. The more he thought, the more the tea house boss trembled, as his face was filled with fear and terror. "Other than you, are there any other people alive?" Yiqing Luo surveyed the surroundings. The ground had already been dyed red with blood, but she couldn't tell if it was the stall owner's blood or the bird beast's blood. After searching for so long, Yin Xiaoyi only found the tea house boss. These bird beasts were really vicious. "Gone. All gone." The tea house boss's voice kept on trembling. "That flock of bird beasts came too ferociously, too suddenly. We didn't even have time to react. People are already all gone." Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes, as her vision suddenly congealed on that drawing old man who sat opposite the tea house the day before. He said that he wanted to use his own brush to draw down all the beautiful things. But did he know that the beautiful things he thought had harmed the entire marketplace? If it wasn't for the fact that they had stopped here that day, the people in the marketplace would not have been targeted by the dark forces. Hatred started to burn from the bottom of her heart. She clenched her fists tightly, as her brows were filled with a cold viciousness. Dark forces. She would not let them off. "Other than these bird beasts, did you see any other suspicious people?" Yiqing Luo had always felt that these bird beasts were not the only ones who came here. If it wasn't for the fact that someone was instigating them from behind, even if they had their own willpower, it was impossible for them to know. Psychological warfare. Moreover, beasts had a strong sense of danger. Even though they knew that they were no match for them, they still came wave after wave. Either that or the pride of these birds and beasts did not allow them to retreat. Otherwise, if they left before killing all the people in the market, they would be treated even more severely. Yiqing Luo was leaning towards the latter. No, The tea house owner paused and suddenly thought of something. Yes, it seems like there was a person among the birds and beasts. A person wearing a black cloak. He left the market safely. The birds and beasts didn't attack him. At that time, he was hiding under the thatch and could not see clearly. He only felt that the black-cloaked man was really bold, actually daring to walk around these ferocious birds and beasts. It was only after the black-cloaked man left that he realized something was wrong. The black-cloaked man? Yi Qing Luo's expression congealed as she exchanged glances with Yan Xiaoyi. Sure enough, it was the dark forces. Their conjecture was indeed not wrong. Yi Qing Luo abruptly stood up as her sharp vision swept across the entire marketplace. In the sky, the birds and beasts were still circling around, giving out ear-piercing cries, continuously summoning their own kind. From this stance, it was obvious that they were going to fight to the death with Yi Qing Luo and the others. Yi Qing Luo was even more certain. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.